Sure seems like every week gets better in college football. So I am expecting and predicting that week 6 will be the best weekend of college football in 2022. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Please join the show. I've left the link in the live chat, and I will continue to do so throughout the night as we will deliver a power-packed take on college football here tonight. This is just no particular topics, no particular narratives or storylines as we've got to make up throughout the off season. So during the off season, leave it up to me and I'll present the storylines and the narratives and all of that. But it's all just talking about football. What did we see last weekend? What have we seen this season? What do we expect to see this weekend? That's it. It's just all about on the field, football performance, results here in 2022. So let's bring it. Here we go, the Voice of College Football. And before we get revved up and get engulfed in the conversation, couple reminders. Number one, we've got excellent content for you. I just produced a Ohio State, Michigan State preview. Check it out. It was just posted a couple hours ago. We had a conversation this afternoon. We went live with Zach Smith from Menace to Sports. Check out that conversation. You want to talk about some solid football talk? Check out the conversation I had with Zach Smith earlier today. That's posted right here at the Voice of College Football on the main channel. Also, in the morning, you will be blessed with a TCU Kansas preview. I'm attempting to deliver more previews, game previews, because people seem to like those and they've done well in the past. And I've gotten away from that, dealing with all these team channels. But we want to size up the best games of the week. And I will look forward to doing that more and more as we get into week 7. But for week 6, I don't know if I'm going to get to any other game previews, but maybe we could take a little poll. And if you've got a request for one, again, we delivered Michigan State, Ohio State a few hours ago. And first thing in the morning, you're going to see TCU and Kansas preview. And so whatever is your game of choice, and we've got a few of them set up here. Miami, North Carolina, of course, ACC Coastal Division matchup. And for as bad as the Canes have been this year, guess what? 2 losses, both out of conference. They're 0-0 in the ACC. So it's all right in front of them. Oklahoma, Texas, of course, the Red River Shootout. In back, LSU, Tennessee, huge game in the SEC. LSU still only lost 1 game, and that was out of conference as well. Tennessee's undefeated, ranked in the top 10. That actually makes sense. Texas A&M, Alabama. I think those are the only helmet matchups I could match up. And while we're on the subject of helmets, it reminds me that I will pull together the P.O. box once again so that you guys can once again deliver helmets or whatever type of memorabilia and gear that you would like to deliver to the Voice of College Football set, a set that we hope to enhance and upgrade here very soon. All right, let's get right to it. But one more reminder, the Amazon link is in the description section of all the videos, every video right here at the Voice of College Football, the Amazon in big caps, Amazon link right there. When you shop on Amazon, which I'm about to do for certain items that you will soon see, I will be using the Amazon link. Again, Amazon's worth $1.7 trillion. Voice of College Football, we're only in the 2 trillion range. So 1.7 trillion, 1.2 trillion. We want to catch Amazon. We want to get there. So help us do that. All right. We have many times kicked off with the real MVP. Last time he wrapped it up. He was the overtime clincher, 2-point conversion winner. Back to kickoff, man. We got the real MVP on the line.
No, I think you got me, Mark. Man, Dr. C.
Oh, I thought it was the real MVP. Boy, he switched that up on me. I should have.
Well, actually, I was going to be the guy, but then I had some technical issues. So then the real MVP got to end the show. So anyway, I wanted my topic, which would have been what I was going to talk about. Unfortunately, due to technical issues, we couldn't. But I disagree with your top 25. I think for the first
How
time,
dare
Mark,
you?
for the first time, I think it should have been called the top 25 that almost makes sense.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Number 2, Kansas, which I lived in Kansas,
Yeah.
so I'm
Okay.
cheering for them. But look at who they've beaten: Tennessee Tech, which
Believe
is
it or
not
not,
Division One.
I did
Uh-huh.
look at who they've beaten. That's how I kind of go about this process. I did
Right.
look at who they beat. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So then they play. They beat West Virginia,
Hmm.
which West Virginia, it has been a complete disaster. I mean, their coach is about to get fired.
Okay.
Um, Houston, which has been a complete disappointment.
Okay.
People were thinking they were going to be this year
Okay.
Cincinnati.
All right.
They just go to overtime and lose.
Okay.
Duke, who has beaten no one, uh,
Okay.
they 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 had a soft schedule, and then finally Iowa State should have beat Kansas. They should have lost this last week, except
Okay.
for the kicker missing
Except
three
for that
field goals.
they didn't. But go ahead. Yeah,
Right, the kicker missed 3 field goals.
I understand
So
that.
if you look at the strength of their schedule,
Yeah.
it's incredibly weak. And if
Okay.
you take in if you take in the factor that they should have lost, except for a kicker that missed 3 field goals, how
Okay.
can you put him at 2?
All right. The way we can put it at two is, first and foremost, you may be making the mistake. I'm not sure, but you might be making the mistake that many people make.
Uh-huh.
You are looking at one team. Okay. Who should be number two?
Oh shoot! I mean, you can put Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State. I mean, I'd
Okay.
even put Michigan.
Okay. You're telling me that Ohio State's schedule is better than Kansas's schedule right now.
Without looking at it, I would guess that yes.
You're
I
going to
mean, we
guess. You may
yeah, I
want to
would.
look at it. You may want to look at it first. Ohio
All right. Did
State's
they play
schedule
Tennessee
doesn't
Tech as well?
Ohio State's schedule does not add up to West Virginia, Houston, Iowa State, and who did I miss? West Virginia, Houston, Iowa State, and Duke. No, not yet. It will, but not thus far. No.
Yeah, they had Rutgers, Wisconsin, Toledo, um,
Arkansas
Arkansas
State
State,
and Notre
Notre
Dame.
Dame.
Notre Dame, Iowa
Notre
State.
Dame's Notre Dame's better than anyone that Kansas has played.
Based on resume, I would put Notre Dame's resume very close to Iowa State's right now. They lost to Marshall. If you want to start to dissect games like you
Uh-huh.
were, Notre Dame was very fortunate to beat Cal. They had a lot of
Yeah.
penalties, a lot of calls go their way, and they also had a Hail Mary in the end zone that tipped off of like 4 Cal players' fingertips that would have won the game. So we can play that. I'll play that game too. All right. And Notre Dame lost to Marshall, a Marshall team that's lost to Bowling Green and others. And that's Ohio State's best win is Notre Dame. And I would say that with Iowa State losing a close game to Baylor and beating Iowa, I'm going to say that their resume right now is, Notre Dame did lay it to North Carolina, but those are two fairly comparable teams, Iowa State and Notre Dame right now. Right now.
Mhm.
And then West Virginia, Duke, and Houston are playing better football than Wisconsin, Toledo, and Rutgers.
Yeah, I mean, you can make the argument. Um,
West
but
Virginia's
like I
had a
said,
loss. West Virginia's first loss of the season was they had a disputed call at the goal line that would have sent the game into overtime against Pitt on the road. And of course, one of their losses was against Kansas. So there's 2 losses right there. And then they lost to Texas. Yeah, I'm not touting West Virginia as a great football team. I'm not touting any of these teams as great football teams by any stretch. I'm at the very most touting Iowa State as a decent football team, as a top 40 football team. But I will say that the way Kansas is number 2, and I hope people understand, and I believe you do because you watch and the way you're arguing is obviously based on the wins, that I in no way believe that Kansas is the second best football team in the country.
No.
I don't think they're the 10th best team or the 20th best team. I don't even think they're, at this point, they got to prove to me that they're the 30th best team in the country. But right now, I'm going to stack the depth of that schedule at this point at number 2 in the country.
At 2. Okay. You know what? I'm going to choose to believe you, Mark. But I have to believe that if I looked into it deeper, there's got to be someone. I mean, Arkansas, that I root for, USC. Arkansas's had a tough schedule,
Oh, absolutely.
But
that's why they were number 1 in the country before they started losing.
Yeah. They've had I think a more impressive schedule, and maybe just the way they've played than Kansas.
Oh, they have had
beating Cincinnati.
Arkansas had a much more difficult schedule than Kansas.
Yeah,
but they've lost the games. There's the difference.
They've lost the games, yeah.
Yeah, they've lost the last 2 games, unfortunately for them. I actually think Arkansas is a better football team than Kansas. I would take Arkansas in a heartbeat to beat Kansas tomorrow.
Yeah, I do too. All right, Mark. Hey, it's the last suggestion, Mark. Hey, I saw another YouTube channel do this, and I take the recommendation if you'd like.
Sure.
But they rent out the name of their studio to whoever wants to for $500. They do it this way, but it could be whether it's an individual or a company, and they say it would be the voice of college football live from the so and so studio. It could be the real studio. The real MVP, if he wants to pay $500 for it to be called the real studio, or someone that owns a business.
The real DA, the real MVP. Anyway, go ahead.
The real. Yeah. Or if any of our folks listening own a business, it could be the, Steve Smith Insurance, blah, 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 studio, the Mark Rogers Show live from that studio.
I like that.
Yeah.
Would I need to put a sign up? Do I put a sign up?
No, you just mentioned the name. You just mentioned they just mentioned the name of it's just the studio, the Mark, your show coming live to you from the so-and-so studio. And each business paid, the way that they do it is a business pays $500. And then whether it's a month or 2, until they call it that name, until someone else pays the $500.
Okay.
So, yeah.
1 month sounds good. We are renting out the studio for the month of November, everyone. You heard it right here.
The studio name, yeah.
The studio name, naming rights, $500 for the month of November. Hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. Perfect.
I love it. I'd love it if someone has a small business or a big business, have the studio named after you.
We will do all sorts of other things for you. We'll put the link in the description section. We'll put the link in the chat where people can go find your site. We'll talk it up big. That's a great suggestion.
There you go.
I love it.
All right, Mark. Have a great evening.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Time to talk to Mike here at the Voice of College Football. What's going on?
Hey, what's up?
Not too much. How you doing tonight?
Oh, can't complain. How you doing, Mark?
I am doing well. I'm ready for some more football.
I got a question for you. I'm trying to think because I can't remember your rankings right off 10, your power rankings, whatever you call them. Don't you have Syracuse ahead of Clemson right now?
No, I did last week before Clemson beat NC State.
Because I think at one point in time, didn't you have Syracuse at like 2 or 3 or something?
Yes.
And I guess I couldn't understand that because I guess if if Clemson and Syracuse played on a neutral,
That's not what it's all about.
well,
And sorry to cut you off because I don't like to interrupt people, but we might as well not even go down this road. It has nothing to do with my evaluation of those two teams playing.
I guess do you just strictly go by
Resume.
okay.
And after 2 weeks, Syracuse had defeated Louisville and Purdue. And Clemson had beaten Georgia Tech and Furman?
Yeah, okay. Is that the reason why in your initial poll, Michigan went even in the top 25, even after coming
Exactly.
off of a playoff visit last year?
Well, last year has nothing to do with it, but yes, I believe that Michigan is one of the 5 or 6 best teams in the country.
But you just strictly go by the fact that we had our kind of marshmallowy schedule at the beginning.
Yes, it's a week-to-week evaluation of everybody's resume.
Now, do you take how they play in the game into example?
Oh, yeah.
Because like I said, in the first
Absolutely.
half of all those games, they were held scoreless, and the games were over at the half. I mean, yeah, they're high school
Absolutely.
teams, but
Yeah.
at no point in time was it ever even remotely close.
Oh, absolutely. I'm aware of that. And yes, if a team beats another team 28-27 and another team beats that same team 50-0, yes, I completely weight those differently.
No, okay. I guess I'm just trying to figure out how exactly it works on the mark.
Well, let me I would release a second rankings if it didn't confuse people. Because I actually started on that the other night while we were sitting here because there were a number of people that made some comments similar to yours, and I totally get it. I totally understand. Yeah, I don't have it here. I believe that my mind is going to be changed just like everybody else's as we see more football. But I believe that Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State are the 3 best teams in the country. I thought that at the beginning of the season before anybody played, and nothing's changed my mind. And I believe that Clemson and Michigan are the 2 closest to those 3. And then after that, boy, I think there's 15 to 20 teams in the country that are awfully close, like that close, like Arkansas, NC State, Tennessee, Kentucky, Ole Miss, Minnesota, Purdue, Oklahoma State, Baylor, TCU, possibly tons of teams.
That's one team I have never understood. I don't know why people are high on Arkansas these last couple years. I've seen absolutely nothing. Like last year, okay, I'll give you, they started off beating the 2 Texas teams, but after that, they were just in a downward spiral the rest of the year.
They were in a downward spiral.
Yeah, like I said, they showed up good because their first 2 games were Texas and then A&M. They won both those games, but then it seemed like they kind of got exposed.
They went 9-4 against arguably the most difficult schedule in the country.
The games they lost, they did not look good, and
they lost to Ole Miss 52-51 on a 2-point conversion. They got blasted by Georgia,
of course.
True, everybody else did too, but they got blasted by Georgia. They lost to what was their other loss?
It wasn't close to Bama either, was it?
42-35 against Bama. They played Bama well.
Oh, they played them that close?
And why am I missing their fourth? Georgia, Bama.
So they beat A&M.
Yeah. Ole Miss 52-51. Their fourth loss must have been Auburn. They lost to Auburn.
Yeah.
This team, they beat Penn State. They beat Texas. They beat Mississippi State. They beat LSU. They beat Texas A&M, Arkansas.
Well, I don't know. I guess that's another team. I guess you can call it SEC anti-bias, but I think there's a lot of people high in Mississippi State, and I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah, I'm pretty high on them.
Now, did the last year they have Fitzgerald, or was it this guy they have now?
No, they had Will Rogers.
Will
Yeah, he
Rogers.
threw 36 touchdowns and 76% completion percentage last year. Yeah.
Now, I
Ravens.
got a quick question. There's
Yeah.
a game that's kind of interesting to me on this coming schedule. I think Iowa's kind of getting a bad rap. I think people are a little high on Illinois after what they did to Wisconsin,
Yeah.
and it looks like Illinois is like what, a 3 or 4 point favorite at home.
Yep.
I got a hunch that I think Iowa can pull this off in Champaign.
Oh, well, of course they can pull it off. Yeah, there would be no surprise there.
I kind of rate Illinois. I mean, they're not a bad team. They can rush the passer.
Yep.
Their defense looks pretty solid. Bielema has got them on the
Really
right
good.
direction. But I kind of see Illinois is kind of like the Kansas, where people want to kind of pump them up a little because they're like the feel good story because they're kind of used to being in
Sure.
the doldrums.
Yeah. But it's somewhat justified.
I think it'll be interesting, but I kind of want to see, and plus, they kind of benefit from the fact that the Big Ten West is just absolutely terrible this year.
Sure. But they have yet to benefit. They haven't played anyone in the division. So we're very early in this process. We've basically had how many games played in the Big Ten West? Purdue and Minnesota played last week. Northwestern and Nebraska played a game.
Yeah, that was ugly.
That's pretty much it.
And now the one good thing that the West has is Minnesota went to East Lansing and just blew the doors off of Sparty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great race. I would not be surprised, except for Northwestern. I think everybody's got a shot. Shoot, Nebraska's 1-1 right now.
Well, and that's what their one is. What, Indiana?
Yes.
At home.
Yes.
And you say unless facts go by me, they still don't have a defense.
No, they don't. Correct.
And they're
I'm not expecting that. I'm just saying that they have not, for as bad as they've been, they have yet to play themselves out of it.
Yeah, that's true. I'm just kind of worried that they're going to start thinking that they're kind of better than they are. I don't think Nebraska's competing in the West. I think there's a chance for Illinois. I still there's a chance for Wisconsin. I think Jim Leonard still has a chance to kind of shed the interim tag if he can kind of finish up like an 8-4 season. I think they can do it.
All right. Well, they've got to go 7-1 to do it.
Well, I think their hardest games are behind them, though. I mean,
Well,
they've already
sure.
played. They've already played Illinois. They've already played Ohio State. I mean, what's their hardest left? What, Minnesota?
Minnesota, Purdue.
And okay, is Michael? Yeah, he's in that. Cover your ears, Mike. I don't think Purdue is legit. I mean, Aiden O'Connell's great. He's a great quarterback. I'll give him that. But they are seriously deficient on defense, and they have no running game to speak of. I don't think Purdue is a legitimate threat in the West.
So your comment about the running game is dead on, circa last season and the last few weeks, but you may want to check their rushing statistics over the last couple games. They have found a running game. They're much like Penn State, who had one of the 5 worst running attacks in college football last year and now is running for the likes of 250 yards against Auburn. Purdue, they're finding a running game. That's why they were able to win, even though O'Connell threw 0 TDs and 2 picks and only 180 yards at Minnesota. So I'm not saying that they've discovered Doc Blanchard and Ernie Davis in their backfield, but that they're running the ball better. I think you can throw a blanket over all 6 of those teams, excluding maybe Nebraska. Yeah, you're right. Their defense is so awful. But the other 5 teams, I would not be surprised if any of them won the division, and that includes Wisconsin coming back to do it.
Yeah. I got a hunch that it's probably going to come down to because I think the last week where Wisconsin, Minnesota always play their trophy game, I believe.
Yep.
I have a hunch that game's going to decide the West. Just like the last between us and that other team is probably going to determine who wins the East.
Yep.
I think it's I think Iowa has a real chance at this one. I think there's a lot of people that are kind of down on Iowa unnecessarily because we kind of handle them pretty good. When Harbaugh always, lets up and, they get some yards and they get some points at the end. But I think that we're not a good litmus test for Iowa. I think that they have a good chance of kind of winning the West.
Well, I agree with you. I still think that they've got a good chance to win the West, but the criticism isn't unnecessarily just because when Iowa gets a first down, there should be like fireworks set off.
Well, the benefit is that if they can get, 10 points of offense, they got a good shot at winning.
Yes.
Plus,
they are basically what you're explaining about Nebraska on the defensive side, but to the 10th degree.
And I always keep wondering if, Kirk Ferentz is going to kind of finally wake up from his nepotism coma and kind of figure out that his kid's not just cutting it, or, their AD, what is it, Bart, I think it is. He's going to kind of just say, enough is enough and do something that gets him back into it.
He either will not do that, much like Mark Richt did not do that at Miami, or he's trying to figure out a graceful way to pull that off.
Well, I mean, I think, he's built up a lot of goodwill because he's been there, 22 years?
Yep, 99.
So, I think he's just kind of, living off that goodwill, but there needs to be some changes made because, I was losing commits. I know they lost a four-star running back that could have really helped them out in this running game because, they're kind of like the old Wisconsin, a lot of the old, stalwart teams of the Big Ten, the 3 yards in a cloud of dust. And they really can't do that if all these O-linemen and running backs keep decommitting.
Yeah, that's Iowa's reputation. But if you really look at their personnel for quite a long time, they've been a poor man's version. And when I say poor, I mean a poverty-stricken man's version of Wisconsin. They haven't had Monte Ball or Braylon Allen or Melvin Gordon, and we can name 10 other guys in the last 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, no, they haven't had the running back production, but they do send. Even in down years, they send a number of tight ends to the NFL.
Oh, well, yes, tight ends, yes. I'm talking about the running game, though.
Plus, on both sides of the line of scrimmage, they're always sending O and D linemen. In fact, I remember for a long time, my Lions had Kyle Van Noy. He was a standout at Iowa, I believe.
Kyle Van Noy.
Yeah, I think he was Iowa.
Wasn't he a BYU guy?
I thought
Kyle Van Noy.
I know that the Lions had a really good D lineman that was from Iowa. I thought it was Van Noy. Might have been thinking of somebody else. Oh, maybe he did go to BYU.
Yes, Kyle Van Noy, BYU.
So I know there was one guy. The name escapes. He might come up to me later, but I know that they've sent a lot of O linemen and D linemen to the league.
Oh yeah. Yeah, some people would be surprised that Iowa currently has the 6th most players in the NFL.
That actually would not surprise me. I didn't know that, but now that you say it, I definitely believe it. And I'm guessing I can probably name the other 5 too. In fact, I bet at least 3 of them are in the top 5 of teams this year.
Yeah. I know it's Alabama, Ohio State. I think LSU's there. Yeah. I know that I saw a list maybe a month ago, and Iowa was 6th. All right, sir. Anything else, Mike?
No, that's okay. Just, keep moving the callers.
Appreciate you being here.
Okay, thanks a lot.
And this is where we are here at the Voice of College Football. We go from Michigan caller directly into...
Jeez. You know what? It's amazing the amount of fans of theirs that have just come out of the woodwork over the years. I continue to be amazed.
Over the months, over
Yes.
last November.
Maybe I shudder to think if they win a second Big Ten championship in the next 10 years, how many more we'll see. But
The next,
I digress.
Mike just stated, Mike being the last caller, here we go.
Yeah.
I got to thank the Michigan fan base. Hey,
Yeah. Hey.
They help us here.
Sure. Yeah. I guess every now and then, once you get some success, you get some more fans committed to the show. It always helps. I know, Mark. By the way, it was tough act to follow on the Pac-12 show last night. I had to follow Mark Rogers. How do you do that?
I heard your statements, David. Those were very kind. However, you know your stuff, and certainly.
Yeah, I'm not. It's tough to follow a living legend. I mean, give me a break. This is not easy. By the way, a great job with Zach Smith today. Thanks for getting in my questions.
Yeah, that was fun. That was fun.
It was
great. I'm glad that you could make it because I know that you always enjoy some insightful college football talk overall, but Buckeye talk in particular. So I was glad to see that we had a pretty good crowd.
Two of the biggest Earl Bruce fans probably in the world there, I'm sure.
What,
for obvious reasons.
Between the two of us.
Yeah, you and Zach.
Zach with a connection with Urban Meyer, who was that's
his grandfather.
But Earl Bruce, yes, I just basically shed a tear when the marching band was on his front lawn playing the fight song prior to the Michigan game after he was dismissed.
I still remember the game before was Marv Cook caught a touchdown from Iowa to beat him. And Rick Bay came in and they let him go, and they went up there. They wore the Earl headbands, Mark. You remember that?
Oh, absolutely. That was a Marv Cook touchdown on like some ungodly 4th and 26 or something. And they had a string of they were offensively challenged that year. Of course, you will know with Chris Carter being suspended and then dismissed from the team. Well, he just decided to go pro. But anyway, really good, talented team that should have fared much better. And despite their offensive issues, they just had a string of difficult losses after they were, I believe, 5-1-1.
Yep.
And they lost 3 consecutive games, including the darkest day in Ohio State history.
Yep. I even remember the tie, at Baton Rouge that year. Yep. In fact, that's where I want to start, Mark. Let's go ahead and talk about the games this week, and let's start in Death Valley with a team that I have some reservations about in Tennessee. You seem to be a little bit more of a buyer in Tennessee than I am. In fact, are you still on record that the team that can challenge Alabama the most in the games that they've got left, at least before Atlanta in the title game against Georgia, is Tennessee?
Yes.
Okay, even more than Ole Miss.
Well, that's a difficult call, certainly, and Ole Miss has shown us quite a bit here. Although Ole Miss has really played one challenging game, and that was a nail biter. So I'm still in Tennessee's camp. Yes.
Okay. I like Hooker. He's been great at quarterback. I still believe they got a little lucky against Pitt. They got a little sloppy against Florida. That's what maybe gives me a little bit of reservations about them.
And Ole Miss's defense is pretty darn good.
Yep. Yeah, Zach made that point today. He's right. I mean, you put a decent defense with a Lane Kiffin offense, that's not a bad combination.
Wouldn't that be something if they were able to pull the upset against Bama, and then you're looking at a 2-game lead of sorts? Let's see. They would be playing that game. I'm going to have to look it up. I usually keep track of pretty well where those games go year to year, back and forth.
I did want to comment, though. I actually think LSU's got a really good shot this weekend, even though I said I'm not the biggest Brian Kelly fan in the world. Maybe it was just him going down there and trying to do that Southern accent that I was never. I mean, Brian, you're an Irish Catholic. Don't go down there and try to sound like Ed Ogeron. You should sound like one of the extras from Good Will Hunting or something. You're not, you're fooling nobody here, pal. I mean, give me a break. That was sad. Maybe that just turned me off. I don't know. But, I mean, did you see that, by the way?
Oh, absolutely. It was just so odd. Like
Yeah.
I've had no investment in the man in regards to rooting for him or anything, and I still cringed and just felt embarrassed for him.
Yeah, it was sad. I mean, it was just,
Why?
talk about just trying to. I mean, maybe he was reading the room and trying to kiss up. It reeked of that. You know what I mean?
Well, you're taking over a struggling football program. You're an accomplished coach, and everybody loves the new coach. Why do you have to play up to anybody? Just win games.
Right.
They don't care what you sound like.
Yeah, that's why I mean, I don't know if he's long for the job. I mean, he's got an amazing recruiting base down there, but he showed he never really wanted to be a big time recruiter at Notre Dame. You know, and even though they recruited at a solid level there, I actually think they're going to do better with Freeman in recruiting. This is why I think there's still an upside with Marcus next year, you know, going forward at Notre Dame and what he's going to be able to do. I know it's a down year this year, but I still think his future is brighter than Kelly's. That being said, I like the way Daniels has looked. What do you think about Daniels, the quarterback from LSU, and how he's looked lately? I think that he might be able to cause some problems for Tennessee this weekend.
Well, the first meaningful game they played was, of course, the opener, and he was in a tough position because John Emery, their star running back, was suspended, and they basically had no running game from the running back position. So he was the entire offense. Now that he's got John Emery back, who had a long touchdown run against Auburn and is carrying the load from the running back position, I think that's helped him. He did, I don't want to say he injured his knee. He left the game for a little while last week, and nothing else was stated about him having to leave the game except for that he had a knee-to-knee contact with an Auburn defender and had to leave the game. I'm lukewarm on Jaden Daniels. I'm not a critic, but he's kind of scattershot. He's not real consistent. He's not the most accurate passer out there.
Well, I'm just saying, I think that's the upset possibility of the week. I'm sure that there's some people out there other than me thinking LSU can pull that one out, especially in Death Valley. Too bad it's not a night setting, by the way. That'd be crazy.
Noon game.
Yeah.
I see. I know that technically it would be an upset, but I wouldn't consider that an upset.
Well, you're right.
It's a 3-point spread.
Right.
Like it's like the Illinois-Iowa game. Somebody just commented about that being an upset, like about Iowa winning in an upset, or can Iowa pull it off? Well, of course they can pull it off. It's Illinois. Let's not overstate these things. So yeah, to me, that's not an upset, but I get your point. Technically it's an upset. It's a 3-point game.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good one. It's going to be an interesting one. Want to get to Red River, Mark. Boy, Colin Cowherd's number 2 team in the country, the Oklahoma Sooners. I don't think that statement aged well for Colin, by the way. That is a program that is not looking good right now. I know you do an Oklahoma show still, don't you?
Yeah, we do. And double nickels on a Brent Venables defense with 41 of those points coming in the first half. When they can throw up 55 and not even need to score in the fourth quarter,
right?
Man, they torched Oklahoma. And up until that point, we didn't even know how good TCU was, and probably still don't. We're even going to have to find out if how legitimate they are. But I find it odd that a lot of Brent Venables, a lot of his apologists say that these aren't his players.
Right.
You really can't implement his system until he has his players. I think that's ridiculous.
Were you always as psyched as that he was a fit there, Mark, or where were you on that decision by them?
Well, I think he's a fit from the standpoint that he's been there and he knows the lay of the land and knows the culture and the campus, and that's where he wanted to go. Apparently, that must be one of the very few places that he would have accepted a head coaching position. Yeah, it's a couple bad weeks. We'll see in the long run. I'm not overly alarmed. It is a bit shocking, a bit surprising that a Brent Venables defense would get torched like that. against a non-heralded team.
Isn't Mullet Man back this week for Texas, Quinn Ewers?
Yes, he is.
That's going to be interesting, with him back at quarterback. I still wonder if he doesn't get hurt. Do you think they pull that game out against the Tide?
Yes.
I think most people do.
He is really good.
Yeah. He came to Ohio State, got that NIL money, and got out the door, didn't he, Mark?
Yeah, he sure did that.
And,
but
seriously?
For all the hype that he got, I was just waiting to see what he had for an Alabama defense, and he is really high ceiling arm talent.
Yeah, it's crazy that Ohio State, and I'm not as optimistic. Zach's talked about the fact that Kyle McCord has looked a little shaky in backup duty, and I am interested to see what he's going to be like next year when he comes in and he's going to be our quarterback after Stroud leaves. But it's interesting. We don't get Ewers, who leaves with that NIL dough, and the best quarterback in Ohio, who was the number 2 or number 3 recruit in that class, which is Drew Aller, ends up at Penn State. Go figure.
Yeah, well, this is partially the new world that it's going to be even more. It's going to be even more necessary to get your scouting in line and be able to select the right quarterback out of all the great players or the great prospects. Because if you don't, then if you choose A over B, and with the transfer situation and guys not wanting to wait to play, then you're going to have to get it right.
Yeah. We've talked about it before. It's just a different college football world with all of it. You talked a little bit about that Utah UCLA game. I'm looking at that 64.5 over. I'm thinking, I asked the UCLA fan, he thinks that's trending towards a high scoring game, like a 38-34. Is your feeling more in the 20s or in the 30s? I know you think it's going to be a close one, right?
Yes, I think it's going to be close because UCLA proved to me, at least early indications against Washington, are that they're a more physical team than maybe they had been given credit for. And you've got to be physical playing Utah. I think that game's going to be fairly high scoring. Easily in the 30s, more so than the 20s.
Okay. So I'm going to be confident taking that 64.5. That's what I'm. I know you're not an expert at overs and unders, Mark, but
I'm not a big over/under guy.
Well, I'm looking at the 2 quarterbacks. I mean, Rising and Dorian Thompson-Robinson is DTR's looking good. So
the only thing that makes me back off on that, and I can't tell you that Utah necessarily has a vintage Utah defense, but they typically are stout there with a strong front 4 or defensive line rotation. But you've caused me to possibly select over-unders this week. I just want to see how I do, and maybe I'm going to do that and just see if I can guess over-unders.
Well, I used to try and hit up those Big 12 games, but then they start setting those way too high all those years. Remember all those Big 12 shootouts?
Yes.
But those got too ridiculously high sometimes. Usually, you just try to read a good quarterback matchup and, if there's average defenses at play, By the way, I'm thinking the Buckeyes minus the 27 this week too.
Wow.
So, I think they cover that. The Sparty secondary can be bombed on even by a high school quarterback.
Yes, I can't dispute that in any such way. They have been beaten down the last 3 weeks in brutal fashion. They just haven't been close. The Maryland game was within shouting distance, but man, they've gotten beaten down. 27 points. Yeah.
Yeah, good old Mel Tucker, but get on that recruiting trail and start earning that dough that he got paid.
Well, he's on it.
Yeah. By the way, is that Minnesota, Maryland this week too, right? Or no, Purdue, Maryland this week.
Purdue and Maryland. I like that game.
Now that's a game to look at. That could be a definite kind of a shootout type game.
Yes, it should be. Although those are the reputations for the two teams. But let's see, Maryland last week, that was a pretty stout defensive effort that they put up against, they didn't like hang 50 on that bad Michigan State secondary and have to win 50-35. They held Michigan State to 14. Purdue played that 20-10 game where they ran it more than they passed it against Minnesota. So that's one thing I got to break myself from time to time, is just looking at these teams based on what I believe they are and really look at, okay, how are they playing? What are they doing? Like our previous caller making a comment about Purdue has absolutely no running game. They have the last few weeks, just like Penn State's discovered a running game.
Yeah, the thing that cost them is I still think their coaching cost them the couple of games that they lost. They really could be undefeated right now, because the Penn State game was clearly winnable, and the Syracuse game never should have been lost.
No.
And I was a Brom guy.
And that unfortunately cost me a pick as well.
Are you going to have your buddy Steve Merrill on tomorrow for some picks?
We had Steve on today, so we're releasing those videos. They're all over the place on our various team channels. So we are now have expanded Steve beyond the 3-pack to do all the team channel teams. And
I'm going to be taking a look at Mark Rogers picks, Steve Merrill picks, try and get an idea on what to do this weekend.
And Steve, by the way, is 5-0 on his under the radar selection.
Nice. All right. Well, here's to a great weekend of college football, Mr. Mark Rogers.
Thank you, David. Always good to hear from you.
Have a good one, my friend.
You too. All right. We've heard from Michigan, Ohio State, and now we had a comment made the other day to the show that from an SEC fan that he thought things were leaning way too heavy on the Big Ten side, but he still loved watching and he still loved our videos, but too much Big Ten talk. So I was like, I didn't even respond. I just noticed the comment. All right, we got Michael on the line. What's going on, Michael?
Hey, Mark, great show with Zach earlier today. I was trying to get a couple questions in. I don't know if you've seen them or not, but it was still a great show. Anyway,
thank you.
I got to say, is Mike Fort living underneath a rock or something?
Is he living under a rock? Well, I don't know. We may need to ask him. When he was calling in, he wasn't under a rock that I could tell. And I believe you're comment on the Purdue running attack, right?
No, actually, I'm gonna talk about I was gonna do the running game, but you did that yourself. I'm gonna actually talk about Purdue's defense and how much better it was compared to what it was last year.
Okay.
Right now, Purdue.
Yes, Michael.
And you said something about they weren't that good. Yeah, they haven't really played, but they showed signs of it last week. You said, and I'm telling you, they're going to show signs of it again this week too. But why is what is it going to take?
Hang on, help me out, Michael, because you cut out and I didn't catch exactly what you said. Did you say that I said that Purdue's defense wasn't very good?
Yeah, you were talking about it with no. Actually, Mike, I apologize. Strike that from the record.
Exactly.
No, it was Mike that said that.
If anything, it was
actually Mike that said that.
Defense after this last game against Minnesota, I went on and on about the secondary in particular.
I apologize about that. Strike that from the record, Your Honor. It was Mike that said that. Anyway, I have Purdue winning this week 38-24 and stuff like that. But if they get past it this week to Maryland, is everybody still going to say Purdue's a fluke? Or do you think they're going to say, okay, Purdue's for real?
Well, for one thing, you know me, Michael. I believe that Purdue was one of the 15 to 20 best teams in the country last year and should have been ranked at the end of the year. As I understand it, the AP and the coaches poll did not.
You there?
What? Yes, I'm here.
All right, I thought I lost you there for a minute. Sorry about that. Anyway, I missed your point.
Okay, my point was going back to last season that I ranked Purdue, I think, 17th in the country to end the year. They were not ranked in the AP or the coaches poll, despite going 9-4 in a strong Big Ten, beating 2 top 5 teams at the time of kickoff and winning a bowl game against Tennessee. So I'm always giving them respect when they earn it. And I certainly think that this year's team is extremely good. They're sitting at 3-2, and they are that way a bit close to being 5-0, and they just beat a really good Minnesota team. So I don't know what to tell you about everybody else and how they disrespect Purdue. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. All right. And the other thing I got to ask you, usually you come out with your 5 top games of the weekend.
Okay.
I got a feeling some of them are going to be bloodbaths this week.
They're going to be who? Blowouts?
Bloodbaths. Yes.
Bloodbaths, yes. Okay, well, let's if you've got anything else to hit me with, go right ahead. And in the meantime, I will look at the games and I will put together a top 5 list.
All right. Why you doing that? I missed your conference rankings this week. Was it the same as last week?
Yeah, nothing
with the
happens.
SEC.
So when teams aren't playing outside of the conference, then it doesn't matter. Like there's nothing else to rank. So until there's any other significant, and I don't believe that there will be non-conference games, we have to wait till postseason because we don't have anything to go on. That's where we stand.
All right.
Anything else, Michael? I think we're losing Michael. Calm down, Michael. It's okay. It's all right. All right, Michael. Let's move it on right here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
What's up, man? How you been?
I'm doing just fine. Is this Aiden?
Yes, this is Aiden, sir.
Aiden from Ohio, who is a Michigan fan.
Sadly, correct? That is me, sir. Yes, correct.
How did that happen? My goodness. Who do we blame for that? Was that bad parenting or what was it?
That was my friend.
The bad water at the house?
Yeah. Man, but I got a hot take for next year.
For next year? Okay.
Yeah, I really have a feeling Texas could be in playoff contention next year. Because I think
not this year?
Not this year, but next year. For 2 reasons. One, I think they'll have the second best quarterback behind Caleb Williams next year in Quinn Ewers. And I also think that offensive line class is going to play a bigger factor next year as well.
Okay. I would agree with both of those.
So I do it.
You still with us, Aiden?
Yes, I am.
Okay. 2 reasons. Offensive line's going to be better because they've recruited all those studs, and they may have the best or second best quarterback in the country. Got it.
Yeah. But
what else you got, Aiden?
Man, that Purdue Maryland game might be something else.
Yeah, I like that one.
Because I think you look at both quarterbacks and those wide receivers we have. And I think both teams can also run the ball relatively well.
Well, it's one of those games that basically allows us to see 2 teams that are on the fringe of contention that we consider to be decent teams, but can they challenge for something meaningful, a division championship? Well, that game is a must for both of those teams, especially for Maryland. There's no way Maryland's going to win the East without winning that game. They can't lose another game. But not that myself or anybody's expecting Maryland to challenge for the Eastern Division Championship, but certainly for Purdue, they've already lost a Big Ten game, and to lose a second, even though it's an Eastern Division game, puts them in a bad spot.
Yeah, well, what's your thoughts on that Tennessee LSU game?
My thoughts is that it's going to be one of the best games of the week, and Tennessee's a slight favorite on the road, Death Valley, but at noon. And Tennessee's a more consistent team at this point. LSU had a pretty shaky performance last weekend at Auburn. Could have lost that game, maybe with some better play calling out of the Auburn Tigers and Brian Harsin and company in the red zone, but they got out of there with a win. Had to play Garrett Nussmeier for 2 series in that game late in the game, and he didn't look good and got a chewing out by Brian Kelly. But the one thing that I came away with that I already knew, it was just confirmed in watching a lot of the second half of that game against Auburn, is that LSU's defense has a number of just freak athletes on it. And but Hendon Hooker, I will trust Hendon Hooker's decision making far above Jaden Daniels.
I think Tennessee's gonna win that game. I know LSU's at home, but I think LSU's defensive line can be minimalized to some capacity with the offense Josh Heupel's runs, and the wide receivers, their second strongest position group, can be minimalized because of the quarterback play over at LSU.
Okay. Anything else for us, Aiden?
I better see J.J. McCarthy go off against Indiana.
Is there a reason you want to see him go off against Indiana? Michigan's either going to win that game like 31-10, or they're going to win it like 49-10. That's going to be the difference between JJ going off and not going off.
I mean, because I want to see I want to see him and those wide receivers get in sync before we have that Penn State game.
No, I made light of your comment, but it's a totally valid comment you made there. It makes total sense. Sure. You want to see them be able to open it up and see the passing game really in sync. And, JJ McCarthy and those receivers, they've got quite a few reps since he's been on campus and been in the system now for 2 years. They've got a lot of reps in practice together, but they haven't made a whole lot of connections on Saturdays. So you want to be able to see that translate to the games and be able to see that they are a cohesive passing attack. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think Ohio State's going to cover that spread. I mean, the defense is looking vastly improved, and we know Michigan State's secondary problems. They've been relevant for 2 years now, pretty much.
Yes, they didn't fix the secondary. That is for sure. All right, Aiden. Anything else for us, sir?
I'm actually going to the Nebraska-Rutgers game Friday, so.
Oh, nice.
So
Enjoy
prayers
that.
to my mom to hopefully not have her go through clinical depression if they lose.
Run that by me again.
I'm actually going to the Nebraska-Rutgers game tomorrow.
Yes, we heard that.
So prayers for my mom that she doesn't have to go through clinical depression if they lose.
Yeah, well, let's hope that mom takes a loss a little bit better than that.
I don't know if she'd take losing the Rutgers, to be honest with you, sir.
You don't think that there's any way that Nebraska can lose to Rutgers?
I said I don't know how she's going to take a loss.
Oh, okay. All right. You got me to the point where I thought I was going to be blasting you there, Aiden. Okay. Very good, sir. We appreciate you stopping by.
Oh, and one more thing before I let you go.
Sure.
Penn State might have the best quarterback and running back duo in the country next year with Nicholas Singleton and Drew Allard.
Okay. I got you.
I could see Penn State making some real noise next year as well.
Yep. I hear you. Well, I appreciate the call.
All right. Talk to you later, brother.
It's a good point about Nick Singleton. Don't forget about Katron Allen, their backup running back there at Penn State. He's a freshman as well, and he's really good and gets a number of carries for the Nittany Lions. And Sean Clifford everyone can't wait for Sean Clifford to move on and hold a clipboard in the NFL and see Drew Aller play for Penn State. And we will certainly clear up the Aller controversy. Is it Aller or Aller? Okay. You see the schedule posted there. We'll remind everyone that on Friday, we've got a number of games there. We see Houston and Memphis and Colorado State, Nevada, UNLV, and San Jose State. But we will be here to wrap up the Nebraska-Rutgers game after the game tomorrow. So we will have post-game of Nebraska and Rutgers right here at the Voice of College Football. So Nebraska fans, you are stuck with me. Your Nebraska post-game host had to work for the weekend and will not be available tomorrow night. So I will be taking on the Nebraska expertise role as post-game analyst. I will do my very best. All right. Look at this. We got an appearance from Joey tonight.
Hey, Mark. What's going on, buddy?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm doing great. So last week I was telling you about my upset picks and things and,
yes.
and how good I was doing. Gave you my upset last week and told you that Wake Forest would beat Florida State.
Yes.
And I was right on that. So
yes.
I thought I'd come in tonight and tell you my upset pick this week.
Okay.
And my upset pick this week is Florida State over North Carolina.
North Carolina State. Yeah.
I mean, North Carolina State, right. I think Florida State will win that game. So that's my upset pick this week. I was thinking and coming close to taking BYU, then just decided, BYU played good against Baylor, but that was at home for them. They went on the road. Every time they've been on the road, they haven't looked that great. Got destroyed out at Oregon. So I couldn't pick them to beat Notre Dame, but I think it's possible. But I think Florida State will beat NC State this week.
All right. Well, I certainly think that they've got a definite shot. It's only about a 3-point spread. So I know that's technically an upset. That is an upset.
It is an upset. It's not really though, because that just means if it was played at Florida State, it'd be probably Florida State would be favored. So, no, not really that big of an upset, but really there's just not too many games this week to call an upset on. To be honest with you.
Well,
I mean, there's a few you could think about, like for instance, the BYU Notre Dame game.
That's only about 3 points as well, isn't it?
Right. Because Utah, I think it's going to destroy UCLA. I think UCLA is overrated.
Okay.
They haven't played anybody. I mean, they're playing.
Washington.
I looked at their schedule. UCLA's played Bowling Green, Alabama State, South Alabama, Colorado. Only team they played actually was Washington, and then they barely beat South Alabama like 32-31 or something like that.
Yes.
So I can't take UCLA. I have to say Utah in that game. So that's not an upset. Well, maybe I haven't even looked at the line on that game, but I'm sure Utah's favored. Even I think Utah will have more fans there than UCLA. To be honest.
Yeah, so I just pulled up the lines on all the games here, starting with Nebraska-Rutgers on Friday night. Let's get into Saturday. I'll throw up some possible upsets for you here, Joey. I'm going to –
all right.
Because I think people would be surprised if they don't keep track of this kind of stuff in regards to there were 2 consecutive weekends where there were 4 or 5 double-digit upsets, not just – they're a 3-point underdog and they won. Because again, I don't consider that an upset. I know it is technically, but it's
right.
But I'm talking about 16-point underdogs winning games. So I'm looking for one. Here's a possible
when I took Appalachian State to beat Texas A&M, that was a big upset.
Yeah, that's an upset. They were I forget, like a
24 and a half.
19 underdog, something like that. Yes, absolutely. There's an upset. Arkansas is a 9.5 point, depending on your service there, from 7.5 to 9.5 point underdog at Mississippi State. Now, there's a potential upset.
No, I think Mississippi State will beat them by 14.
Well, I'm telling you it's a potential upset. I'm not telling you I'm picking it, but Arkansas could definitely win that game. Purdue and Maryland. Now, Purdue's a 3.5 point underdog. They could win that game. There's another one.
That's a possibility, but I would take Maryland in that game.
Tennessee and LSU. LSU's a 3-point dog at home. They could win that game.
I called. Now, I actually predicted it's not my guaranteed lock of the week, but I think LSU will win that game. It's not the game I'm playing. I'm playing Florida State to pull the upset. But if I was going to play that game, I'd take LSU.
Oklahoma is up to a 9-point underdog against Texas. If Dylan Gabriel's healthy, that could be an upset. And I know people are going to go crazy about the way Oklahoma looked last week, because you know what people screw up on all the time, and why they usually lose most of their money is they overreact to last week's game.
Yeah, you can overreact. Now, I think TCU is a great team, and I think TCU will beat Kansas this week. But that's not an overreaction to my thought about TCU beating Oklahoma. It's just, I just think.
Well, in that case, Joey, though, I would think you are pretty much basing that only on the Oklahoma game, just because TCU didn't play anybody before that, like nobody.
Well, no, I had said even earlier in the year, I said it would be great if Kansas could be 6-0 going into Norman. I said, but they're going to trip up at playing TCU this year, I believe. I had called that weeks ago. Now, I would like for them to beat TCU. I'm not calling that TCU is going to win the game for sure. I'd love for Kansas to win that game. I'd love for them to be 6-0 and go into Norman and beat Oklahoma too. But I just think TCU is going to be too much for them.
I'm kind of surprised that Ole Miss is only a 16.5 point favorite against Vandy. I think they cover that big.
Yeah.
North Carolina, here's another upset for you if you want to consider this an upset. North Carolina is getting 3.5 at Miami.
Yeah, I would leave that. I'd leave that game alone for me.
Here's another one for you. Iowa's getting 3.5 at Illinois. They can win that game too. There's your Notre Dame BYU game.
I remember somebody asked me about Indiana yesterday, and I said, I could take Indiana in that game, and I don't remember who they're playing now.
They are playing. Oh, they're playing Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, I said, well, I could see Indiana winning that game. I'm not going to pick it, but somebody had asked me about it.
I'm not seeing that one.
So there's the line: Florida State and NC State.
Yeah, 3 or 3.5.
Yeah. It's moved a little bit. Now, if I really wanted to call it upset, I'd say Texas A&M will beat Alabama for the second year in a row. But there ain't no way. You can't never go bet against Nick Saban.
It is just not looking strong, is it?
No.
Not at all. Fresno State and Boise State is typically one of the biggest games every year in the Mountain West and in the group of 5, and they're just not very good, either one of them. No.
Boise State laying 5.5. Yeah, Yeah, there's just so many games this week that I had to leave alone. And if I had to, like I say, if I went down through there and I had to pick an upset, it would be Florida State, even though it wouldn't be a giant upset. It's just what I had to go with this week.
Yeah, I like it.
All right, man.
I like it, Joey.
I will get off, let you bring somebody else in.
I appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you, sir. We will talk
Always
to everybody
see
later.
You. Absolutely. Thanks, Joey.
See you later, bud.
The Mountaineers, who in the world do they play this week? Shoot, I forgot. No, they've got a bye this week. Yes, West Virginia. Joey's team goes up against the Baylor Bears next Thursday. So we'll have to do a little West Virginia post game after the Thursday standoff against Baylor next week. I'm right there with Exploring with Ben. He knows what he's talking about. He says, join Mark on Patreon, patreon.com. Just $5 a month gets you extra perks, Mark's picks. Always worth it to get my picks, of course. Access to the Discord. That's your real star right there. That's the drawing card right there, the Discord, where you can talk with people like Tide Guy, and you can talk to Jordan Bowman and Eric and Tim and Tony and Exploring with Ben, of course. And lest I miss anyone, Will and others. A cast of thousands, as I like to say. And then, of course, shoot, if you like to look over some tremendous predictions, well, we've got our media guys that chime in with their predictions, and I will post those a little bit later tonight. And then we also have Steve Merrill from Wager Talk. So we just started this last week, everyone. Steve Merrill from Wager Talk joins me on Thursday. We record a wagering segment for every team channel. So Ohio State, Michigan, Nebraska, Iowa, on down the line. All those team channels. So you get a wagering segment there. And then Steve joins us on Patreon, and you get Steve's under the radar selection of the week. And Steve is 5-0. So join us on Patreon. All right, we got Sean going to join us tonight. What's going on, Sean?
Hey, Mark, how's it going?
I'm good. What's going on with you?
Nothing much. Pretty looking forward to this weekend. I mean, really kind of unexpectedly a strong weekend of games if you were to look preseason.
Man. Yeah.
I mean, pretty much I think everyone had that TCU and Kansas as a ranked matchup coming into this week, right? Like that's pretty standard. And at Texas, Oklahoma, neither one of them would be ranked. Everyone pretty much knew that was going to be the case, right? I mean, wild year so far. I'm still kind of waiting for that fourth team to emerge here. And I don't know if we'll get any clarity on that this weekend with, some of the – unless Tennessee does Tennessee going to Baton Rouge right here. Kind of surprised to see they're actually giving 3 in that game. And also surprised to see that that's a noon kick as well. I mean, that's an interesting line. LSU as a home dog against Tennessee.
That is obviously all about TV. So CBS for a long time has wanted to put Alabama and Texas A&M. I believe CBS only has 2 primetime games per year. And much like last year, they had Alabama, Texas A&M, and they wanted that. And those get selected, many of them, before the season starts.
Yeah.
So they made that selection, Alabama, Texas A&M. And then in terms of, I think that the next slot goes to the CBS 3:30 game.
Yeah.
Which I don't know what they went with this week. Let's see. They must have gone with.
I know Ohio State, Michigan State's on Fox, right? They're on ABC at 4.
The CBS 3:30 is Georgia Auburn. Okay, interesting. And then they went. Then I believe it defaults to the ESPN 7:00 SEC game, So they went with who are they?
South Carolina at Kentucky.
Oh my word!
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
So Tennessee LSU is basically the number 4 game on the docket.
Now, see, I am not 100% positive on that, but if you go week to week, you can pretty much follow that CBS is 3:30 is the number 1 game, and then ESPN 7 o'clock is the number 2 game, and then you can go to the ESPN noon game as being the next SEC matchup. That's what it typically you can just see based on the matchups. Who in the world would have selected Kentucky, South Carolina over LSU and Tennessee?
I mean, I think it's arguably a better game. I don't think there's a huge
Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, well, they probably got. I don't know. I mean, like the CBS that was probably the number. They probably got 2 choices for games this week or something. I have always been curious about that. Why are there so few CBS primetime games? I mean, you probably could offer some insight on this, given your background.
Well, it's just whatever they've determined. So, yeah, I can't offer a whole lot of insight because I don't make the negotiations. I just worked at a sports, network for a lot of years, but this is above my pay level. But it just goes into the negotiations. So I don't know what CBS shows on Saturday night that they would either value or that they would tend to not value.
They mostly, like, when they're running like reruns of like CSI and Jeopardy and stuff during those time slots. So I mean, I don't know if there's anything. I mean,
because back when CBS first took over the SEC, and that was in the mid 90s, early to mid 90s, they showed more primetime games.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know why they show less. I don't know if the SEC demanded more money to be paid by the networks, but you wouldn't think so, because you would think that the SEC would love to be on network television in prime time.
Yeah, I mean,
they would want that every week.
Oh, absolutely. And you would think CBS likewise. I mean, I'm sure the big football games are getting better ratings than what they normally put on. And I mean, especially nowadays, I mean, like, who watches live TV for anything except sports anymore? I mean, obviously there are some, but it's
sure.
I mean, everything's streamed except for sports.
Yep.
So now, I mean, I'm just I don't know. These networks are fairly slow to adjust. Speaking of the SEC, one game I'm surprised you didn't mention when you were giving some potential upset spots. Mizzou is getting 11 or 11 and a half. Against Florida.
I went past that. You're right. Yeah.
And that's a game, like, I can see anything can happen in that game. Mizzou could blow out Florida. Florida could blow out Mizzou. It could be competitive. Like, I have both those teams really wildly inconsistent this year. I mean,
well, I would love to see Mizzou back up their Georgia performance. Not that they're going to go out there and beat somebody of that caliber, but I mean, Missouri has done basically nothing in the last 2 football seasons that would lend me to believe that they're capable of beating any decent team until last Saturday.
Yeah.
So put that in the category of, maybe the analogy or the correlation doesn't work perfectly, of Illinois a few years ago as a 32-point dog beating Wisconsin and then doing absolutely nothing close to that the rest of the season.
Or before that in that season.
Before that, yes. So Mizzou, it's only an 11-point spread, so Vegas is obviously giving them a decent shot of winning the game outright. That's not a crazy point spread.
I mean, Florida nearly lost to USF though at home. I mean, they're way worse than Missouri, and so I mean, I know Florida has it in them to completely show up and lay a dud on the field. I mean, they've done it multiple times this year already. So but I don't know. I mean, looking, through the games this week, Texas Tech at Oklahoma State is kind of a tricky possible upset one.
I thought about mentioning that one as well. Certainly, if they were at Texas Tech, I would have jumped on that one.
Yeah,
but Texas Tech through the years hasn't seen they've pulled a lot of upsets off in Lubbock, but I can't recall too many on the road.
Yeah. Lubbock. Have you ever been to Lubbock, Texas?
No,
before?
I've not been to Lubbock.
It's kind of, I don't even know how to describe it. It's kind of a bizarre place. If you've never been there, it can be a little bit. I mean, it's really flat, and it feels like you're in a different world, kind of out there, and
it just feels isolated.
Oh yeah, very much so. And the campus is different. It's a unique type of place. So I mean, like I'm not surprised that that they perform, and they have traditionally performed a lot better at home there through the years. But I mean, I'm not 100% sold on this Oklahoma State team yet. I mean, I can imagine. I mean, there's certainly a path for them to make the playoffs, and I don't. I mean, if they lose one game and win that league, I mean, you imagine that would be enough to get in the playoffs this year. But a 1-loss Power 5 championship team usually will. I mean, get in. But
you did a very bad thing here. You mentioned Lubbock, Texas, and just mentioned basically, the oddity of Lubbock, Texas. So you got me to look up Lubbock, Texas here.
Okay.
And of course, the one thing I am reminded of that I did know is that it is the birthplace of Buddy Holly.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely.
Lubbock, Texas. And so you got me started on looking at maps. I could look at maps like 5 hours a day. I love looking at maps. I'm big into geography.
You and me both.
Okay, that's very cool, because I was kind of like, I see that nothing's close to Lubbock. Like I would like to run Google next how the distance between Lubbock and Dallas. It looks like it's got to be like 3.5 or 4 hours away.
Oh, it's at least that, and I mean probably. I mean,
yeah,
you're. I mean, it's like 4 hours from El Paso.
Yeah, so it's almost
like 2.5 hours from like Midland, Texas. And those aren't big cities, by any means.
Sure, I was just going to say that. I've never been to any of these. The only place I've ever been in Texas is Houston and College Station. Those are the only two places I've been to in Texas. And I'm looking at Lubbock, and I'm looking at, the places that I've heard of is that it's somewhat close to Abilene, Midland. I don't even know why I know Abilene, Texas, probably because it was a song. Midland,
Christian. They've produced some football players. They've had some.
yeah, Abilene Christian. Odessa, Texas, I've heard of, and Amarillo. It looks like it's about 2 hours from all those places, and it's actually closer to the New Mexico border than it is just about anywhere in Texas.
Yeah, it's not that far from like Las Cruces, New Mexico, but I mean it's I mean, especially grew up in the Midwest my whole life. You know, grew up mostly in Michigan, where there's like real terrain and real vegetation and stuff. It was a different experience out there. It's the closest place I've ever been that felt kind of like the Old West.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just, and it's So I mean.
I'm fascinated now with Lubbock, Texas. All right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Sean. I hijacked our conversation about Lubbock, Texas.
No. I can talk about that stuff for hours. I don't know how interesting the rest of the audience,
of course,
is in this geography conversation. But
hit me with the next game or the next topic.
I mean, I was going to say through the Big Ten right now, I think the West. I mean, I don't know how to predict that. That just seemed it seems like about as flat of a division as there is in the country, and I'm wondering, like Wisconsin and Iowa. I mean, the traditional powers in that division are. I mean, they just seem like they have seemed so slow to adapt with the times. I mean, they're still playing football like it's 2005, Iowa and Wisconsin, and the doormat. A couple of the doormats rising up a little bit right now. Do you have any beat on the West there? Who's going to come out of that division?
Sean, I would correct you. If you look at an Iowa box score, it looks like it comes from like 1973. It doesn't look like 2005. It doesn't look like 1995. It doesn't even look like 1985 when they had Chuck Long, a almost Heisman Trophy winner. He was throwing for 300 yards a game.
Yeah.
Their box scores look like they're coming from 1973.
I mean,
I think Minnesota is the most complete team in the West, and they're coming off a loss to Purdue. So they've already lost a near crucial game, an important game. It would be more important in most divisions. Like the Wake Forest loss to Clemson pretty much sealed their fate. You got to feel horrible if you're a Wake Forest player. You're coming off the field. You just lost to Clemson in 2 overtimes. You came this close to winning, and basically, walking off the field in September, it's a September game that you just blew the division title because they've got to lose twice, and you've got to go undefeated. Whereas this scenario in the Big Ten West, that loss hurts. That's a key loss, Minnesota, Purdue, but Purdue's going to play Wisconsin, and they're going to play Iowa, and all these teams are going to play each other that are pretty much all about the 40th best team in the country. And so who knows? We could have a 3-way tie at 5-4 in the Big Ten Western Division.
And I think something that I haven't looked exactly at Minnesota's schedule, but they have one of the best crossover setups, don't they?
Absolutely.
I mean,
they do play Penn State.
Well, it seems like the team almost every year, the team that wins the West misses two of the big 3 or 4, depending on how Michigan State's playing. The team that gets to play Maryland, Rutgers, Indiana.
Absolutely.
Those are the teams that come out of that because it's just such a flat, dead league right now. Do you think Jim Leonard has a real shot of retaining that job? Because I really do. I feel like he's the favorite.
Yes, that's why they made this move. They are about 80% confident that he's the guy, but just in case, if he shows that he's not the guy and the team looks really bad under him, they look uninspired, he doesn't coach really well, and they don't put things together and they're not competitive, then they can always, look at this as a 7-game audition. And if he looks really bad, then they've got an out. But they're about, I would guess, this is my estimation, about 80% sure that Jim Leonard is their choice and he's the guy, but they want him to somewhat prove it.
Right. And Wisconsin, to me, they seem one of the more parochial programs in the country. They really like their guys. That's why they hired Paul Christ when he was a 500 coach over 3 years at Pitt. They're a family oriented. I mean, they really, and they want to run the program the way they've run it for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
I mean, do you agree with that approach, or do you think this is?
I believe that that's a decent consideration as a tiebreaker, but I would not want to run a program thinking that our coach should be a Michigan man or a Kansas State man. That's been proven a million times that it doesn't matter. But if I've got 2 guys and we are really down to the wire and I can't separate the 2, and one was the star quarterback 30 years ago, and he's a homegrown native of the area, and all of that's working for him. Yes, maybe that guy works just a little bit harder. Maybe he understands the culture just a little bit better and all those things. But we've got just way too many examples of, if we went through every coach in the country and their background, where they're from, where they've coached before, they're from all over the place.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mark. Look forward to a great weekend.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate you stopping by.
Take care.
Our guy Larry is asking, Mark, why does Penn State keep getting disrespected? You're one of the few who defend us. It's kind of wild and ignorant. Well, I am not wild and ignorant. So you found a good home here, Larry, where we can be truthful about Penn State football. There you go. How about that? All right. Next up, we got Tide Guy. Tide Guy, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Mark, how are you?
I am doing just fine.
Hey, I come up with a question yesterday.
Yeah.
And I brought this up to 365 today, and they haven't had an answer. I don't know if you saw it on the Pac-12 show about probably 2024, we're going to go to a 12-team playoff. If not, it's going to be 2026. We know that for sure.
Yep.
Now, the week that the first round of the playoffs would start, more than likely would be the third week in December.
Yep.
And so the third week of December, on that Wednesday, we have National Signing Day.
Yep.
How is that going to work out when, your coaches are worrying about, the playoff games and then trying to focus on recruiting? Do you think that they get rid of finally this early signing period and just go back to February?
Well, let's look at a calendar. Not that this is going to change anything. I'm just curious because exactly what you state is the truth. That, for example, this particular season, 2022, we will play conference championship games on Saturday, the 3rd of December. And we will need to start a playoff. If it was a 12-team playoff, that first round would have to be, if we stay within the same structure that we currently stand, we would play the first round on the weekend of the 17th. We would play the quarterfinals. The final 8 would play on Christmas Eve weekend, and then we would play the semifinals just like we do right now on the weekend of New Year's Eve, and then the championship game on the 10th or 12th. So yes, National Signing Day this year is Wednesday, December 14th, 3 days before the first round of the college football playoffs, which I'm guessing because there's going to be how many games played? 4?
Well, there's going to be 4 in the first round because you're going to have.
So maybe
teams.
They'll probably play. I don't think they're going to play 4 games on Saturday. I could see something like a game on Friday night and 3 on Saturday or something like that. Maybe
a Saturday, Sunday, kind of like they do in the NFL. Or
no, they're not going up
NFL
against
games. No. So it'd probably be Friday, Saturday.
Yeah, they're not playing against the NFL. They don't even play the Rose Bowl against the NFL. Anyway, I think it's a great. The coaches. Okay, this is my understanding. And if anybody knows better, certainly I do not consider myself an expert on this topic. If anybody knows better, please supply that in the chat. But this is what I know about the situation in regards to the early signing period, which I think we're working on a 3rd or 4th year here. I think this is the 4th one because I distinctly remember Urban Meyer having a early signing period his final season, which would have been 2018. So maybe this is a 5th year. But anyway, it's obviously very recent. And the coaches didn't like it. The coaches did not want it because of this very fact. Even if you're just playing a bowl game, and for those teams that make a conference championship game, they've got to prepare for an extra week, just 2 weeks before National Signing Day, instead of being on the road. And so the coaches didn't like it. This is what I understand is that the feedback overwhelmingly from the athletes was that most of them have made their decision. They're tired of being called and texted and hounded. And I think what's proven out is 85% of them, and I think it increases a little bit every year, do sign on National Signing Day in December. So that's what's kind of working against what you're talking about, is that it appears as though the athletes want to be done with it.
And I know there's some athletes, and this don't happen a lot, but I know like at Alabama, we've been getting 10 athletes that come in January.
Yes.
So they like the signing period before they come in instead of. But the problem is with this early signing period, I think you're also seeing a product of it is you're getting coaches now fired in September and early October because you got to have a coach in place in November for that signing period. You see what I'm saying? So my thing is,
well, it
how does this
helps.
work?
Yes.
So now you're going to have these coaches, having to get ready for bowl games, worrying about recruits. And yeah, I'll grant you that the majority of them already know, but there's still a handful of, maybe there's a kid fighting between, let's say, a Georgia and a Michigan who's in the first round of the playoffs, or an Alabama and a USC is in the first round of the playoffs, and there's a kid in California deciding between the two. It's hard for the coaches to get their players ready and try to fight for that last recruit because both of them are very important.
Absolutely. So I'm trying to survey what happened this past season. Obviously, the Brian Kelly situation and the Lincoln Riley situations were aberrations. Those, boom, they acted in a moment and they knew exactly LSU got their man, USC got their man, and they didn't go on some big coaching search, and they got their guy immediately. I'm trying to because you do mention about how long it took some of these other schools to get a head coach. So Oregon. So Mario Cristobal leaves Oregon. They play in the Pac-12 championship game. He left like the next day. So they play in the championship game. And then on Sunday, which would have been, we're going to use this calendar, it's the same thing, the 4th, he's gone. And I wonder when Dan Lanning was hired at Oregon to be able to reel in that class and keep it together at Oregon. He was hired on, it looks like the 11th. So a week later. So it takes Oregon a week to hire Dan Lanning, and he's got about 4 days to recoup a recruiting class. And he did it.
Yeah, he did it.
Oh, it's ridiculous. I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want to have to try to do that. It's crazy, but he did it. That would be an interesting kind of process to go through ever since early signing day, all the firings in college football, when guys were fired, when they got hired, how good those recruiting classes were, and how good they were supposed to be. How good were they 2 months prior or in the summer? That would be fascinating to see.
Right.
I got enough views on that video. I would start working on it tonight.
And I'm sure there's people out there smarter than me that's already figured out this problem and are working on it. But it's something I thought of yesterday, and I'm like, I've not heard Mark Rogers. I haven't heard 3-6. I haven't heard anybody address this issue. And I was wondering if anybody, outside had thought about that as an issue.
Well, one reason is we're not as smart as you, Tide Guy.
Trust me, you
I
are.
will say that somebody, I'm not going to take credit for this because I don't know if I brought it up or somebody may have asked me. Somebody's smart like you, but we did talk about this. But it's been a few years ago, like talking about an extended playoff and National Signing Day moving, because we have had it for 5 years now, so it's been discussed. But I haven't heard like it being a discussion point like by mainstream sports media at all.
Yeah, because to me, I would hate to be coaching a team in the first round of the playoffs and also having to fight to keep my, recruits. Absolutely. Because both of them are very important. You got to win playoffs to keep your job. And if you don't get the recruits, then you're not in the playoffs next year or the year after. So, and a lot of people, I should say a lot of fans and coaches aren't in favor of this early signing period. Even now, like you said, when you're practicing for a bowl game and you're worrying about recruits and that, it just makes it easier to get rid of the season, have the signing day the middle of February. It gives you, a month at least if you're into the playoffs to catch up on recruiting before, they start signing.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's a great
So-
point, and I got to think that it's being discussed and talked about. But you know what, Tide Guy, I will say that I guarantee it's being given a lot less consideration than it should be, because it doesn't affect or impact directly the money that's coming into college football because of expanding the playoff.
Right, because we found out that that's going to it's going to go from $500,000 to $1 billion for 2 years, and that's before they renegotiate.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you're probably looking at probably close to tripling the money. And so, yeah, I understand that. One last point I'd like to make is I'd like to tell everybody out there to join Patreon. It's the best $5 you'll spend every month. You can come on shows. There's a chat 24/7 in Discord. We do calls every Saturday during games. It's a lot of fun. You'll learn a lot of stuff. Plus, the big thing is you get Mark's picks. You make a little bit of money.
I'm going to throw my record out here. I'm going to scare everyone away. You can look at the bright side, though. I'm 50. I believe I'm only 51-50 against the spread right now. So you can look at that two ways. Either I'm having a bad year, or if I hit my track record that I almost hit exactly, that my picks are going to be outstanding the rest of the season. One way or the other.
There you go. We'll make a lot more money the second half.
But get there because it is scored. That's the drawing card right there for sure. Absolutely.
But Mark,
All
you
right.
have a great night and great show.
Thanks, Tide Guy. Appreciate the question. It was a good one. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
All right. 2 calls. Let's do that. 2 more calls here at the Voice of College Football. We got Will looking forward to that romp over BYU on Saturday.
Yeah, Mark, I don't understand this. I really don't. What college football is making this decision. Why aren't there college football games every Thursday?
I don't get it either. And this is why, I'm sorry to cut you off. You probably had good reasons why. I'll let you go first.
Well, the reason why I'm talking about it is this game that's on tonight. It's terrible. It's like the Iowa-South Dakota State game. It's 3 and out after 3 and out. Like, I want to watch college football now. Like, now is the time where many people would turn the channel to college football, and now they just haven't.
Well, I'm probably going to get slapped upside the head by our audience when I make this statement, but it's just the truth, and I tell everybody the truth all the time, is that when there were NFL games on Thursday night on free TV as of last year and before that, and then there was the likes of Tulane against Houston and East Carolina against Richmond on Thursday night. Those were the typical, you usually had your American Conference game, and then you had your couple Mountain West games, and every so often we'd have a Pac-12 game or an ACC game. I was watching the NFL. So anyway, my point, though, is there's a few reasons why college football should be on Thursday night. A few different reasons here. Number one, it takes people a long time to change habits. And the number of people that are going to be on Amazon isn't anywhere close to what it's going to be in 2 years, 5 years, whatever, as people change their habits. But there's still an older audience that will watch football on TV way above any choice that they would make to try to figure out, how do I get on Amazon? How do I do that? I got to pay for it. All that other business. Number one. Number two, the reason there's a glut of live events on ESPN all the time, even if they're not even good, lacrosse, softball, cornhole, whatever, is people love live sports. And when I worked at ESPN, it was discussed all the time. We went from, when I started working at ESPN in 2001, week of Christmas, 2001, we had so much more taped programming. You know, if you looked at ESPN2 on a weekday afternoon, bunch of fishing shows, exercise shows. Anyway, it was easily determined as we went through the years, put on live events. That's why the number of college basketball games just kept increasing every year. Just shove them wherever you can. Have college basketball on until 2:00 in the morning. just have it on all over the place because people love live sports. And to your third point, Will, when the game sucks, the NFL game, tons of people, even if they prefer the NFL, and I will be one that will admit, okay, if I'm watching the Colts and the Broncos on a Thursday night, and that's what I preferred over watching Houston and Tulane, well, you know what? It's 21-0 at half, and Houston Tulane's going into the fourth quarter, and it's 38-35. I'm going to watch the rest of that game. I'd rather watch that game. And my next point would be you start those games before you hook the audience. You kick them off at 7:00. These NFL games don't kick off until like 8:20. You've already played half the game. If you've got a good game, you hook the audience. And even if you didn't, even if you take a hit at halftime, you had a college football game with a good rating for half the game. And there you go. There's so many reasons why there should be games on Thursday night. Absolutely.
And also, I'm really hoping that Tennessee can hold serve against LSU. Like, I don't want LSU getting high up in the rankings. Like, it hurts my soul.
This vendetta against Brian Kelly is just way too much. You need to back off on this. Just forget about Brian Kelly. He's gone.
Yeah,
he's gone. See him in the first round of a 2024 college football playoff. You can see him then. You can see him come to South Bend for a opening round playoff game. How about that?
Have you ever remembered a time where the Red River rivalry is between like two? I mean, I know they'll be good at the end of the year, but at the time, like two teams that just aren't playing this well.
Well, Oklahoma's been good since Bob Stoops got there, like nonstop good. 8-5 was one bad season they had. Bad season. So, it's been 20 years for them. But if we go back into the 90s, I could find some games. But yeah, it's been a long, long time.
Yeah, like, I don't know. That just struck me looking at the games. Like, I'm just surprised that. I mean, obviously, I get it why it's still on ABC. But
Michael Hogue wanted me to go through the best games of the week. And I'm not going to take your time going through, but I listed like 12 games that I think are really good games.
That just shows how like great the season's been, Mark. Like even during like this is a bye week for a lot of teams, and they're still great games. It's why I mean obviously the top teams are still at the top, but they're definitely the variety of good teams, like decent teams, is a lot higher than because there's obviously like Colorado's terrible, but I feel like there's like a less terrible teams and more decent teams this year than
I agree. Here I got you. I knew I'd find one pretty quick. 1997, Oklahoma eventually went 4-8, and Texas went 4-7.
That was the year when Texas got demolished by UCLA, correct?
Oh man, nice call by you. Look at that. I remember that game. Yes, 66-3. Why do you remember that? Or know anything about that?
I think it's just been my scroll through Wikipedia. I think I found a game. I think I remember it. Like I just go to like one game and then I start looking at the teams that they played and then I look at the teams that they played and it becomes a scroll of me just going through college football.
I used to be like you, like that myself. But since I do this all the time, I tend not to do that as much anymore. There it is. Yeah. 2 4-win teams playing in the Red River rivalry. Yes, UCLA 66-3. That was with Cade McNown at quarterback. 1997, I believe they won the Cotton Bowl. Yes, they did. They beat Texas A&M.
I don't know. I understand why Fox does this, but why does the big noon kickoff always have to be like just out of blue blood and not the best game? Like for big noon kickoff, for like me to like watch it, like I want to see the best game. And like Michigan, Indiana, we know it's going to be like a 4-4 win for Michigan. So
well, I'm going to let you think about that for all of about 3 seconds, and then you can answer it. Why do they exist? What are they doing? What's their goal?
I guess to get the biggest amount of viewers.
Make money.
Yeah. I mean, I know game day is going there too, so that helps a bit, but it just frustrates me why. I don't know. It just frustrates me that like the big games don't get the big attention.
Well,
I understand.
if we're looking at the noon games and we've got them pulled up right here, like, so being a young guy, Will, and I know this from having two kids that are, I'm guessing, roughly your age. My kids don't care. Like, I think you understand this better than most people your age because you're a sports fan, so you get the whole network thing. But my kids understand it. My kids, first of all, since I'm a TV guy, they've heard this stuff, but also they understand that back in the day, ABC was a big deal and CBS was a big deal and NBC was a big deal. And that's, because they've heard me go on about the history of different things related to entertainment and sports. But like my daughter, like there's This Is Us. She loved that show, This Is Us. And that was kind of our thing to watch that together for a few years until she went to college. But she made a comment to me a couple of weeks ago that it was the last This Is Us, or this was a few months ago. And I said something to her about her friends liking that show. And she's like, said something like, my friends couldn't even find NBC. They'd like, and not that she even watches it on NBC on TV. She probably streams it too. But I just don't think people look at it like that, or at least certain levels of ages don't look at it. So like, what do you care that? So look at these noon games. Like, I think that there are some really good noon games. So we've got Tennessee, LSU, TCU, Kansas, obviously, is the wild card good one. Arkansas, Mississippi State, Texas, Oklahoma, Purdue, and Maryland's going to be on the Big Ten Network. So you can watch all these games, right? Then why do you care who's broadcasting them?
Well, but like I get it, but it just doesn't look right to me when I look at the networks and I see Fox doing a game that's going to be a blowout and FS1 doing a ranked game. But yeah, I understand what you're saying, Mark.
Who's showing TCU and Kansas? Oh, FS1. Yeah. Well, you make a good point. There are people out there that will, and our buddy Tony tells us this all the time, Altamore. He explains that the network somewhat drives how many people watch that game. Some people will just blindly tune to either ESPN or Fox to watch college football. And so, Michigan, Indiana, they'll just start watching it, not knowing, okay, there's this really interesting game over here on FS1, and you got to find it. For me, it's on 75, but it's there. But yeah, a lot of people don't think. Fringe college football fans, they just, they go to the networks and watch whatever game.
Yeah, and I'm in college right now, so I'm usually in the dining hall watching the noon games with some of my friends.
Yeah.
And they only have ABC and Fox on, so like I had to tune to the Kentucky Ole Miss game on my phone, and that was a little annoying. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, it still matters. You're right. It still matters. Not as much as it used to, and won't matter as much in the future, but it does.
Well, can I just plug my channel for a second, Mark?
Well, I was going to say that, Will. We want you to let people know where they can find you.
Mm-hmm. You can find me on Will ND on YouTube. I'll after I get off, I'll put the link in the chat. But I'm going to be live reacting to the Notre Dame BYU game tomorrow night. It's going to be like Crazy Leprechaun reacts to Notre Dame BYU game, and you'll probably get a few reactions from me, kind of doing what GBD does with West Virginia, and it should be fun.
Will ND, is that all one word?
I think, yeah, it should be all one word. But you can't really find it on the search on YouTube. It's kind of
I can't find it.
Yeah, so I have to just put the link in the chat. But yeah, it should be. Yeah, definitely excited for this week of college football. Hopefully there'll be some upsets. Who knows?
So basically with you and all these other people I can't come up with right now, but all these other people starting these YouTube channels, you guys are going to run me off the air here.
No, Mark, you know you always put us in our place when we have a bad take. You're the real knowledge.
I'm just kidding, Will. I appreciate it. And we definitely want people to follow your channel and get over there, subscribe. I will as well when I can find it. So leave it in the chat, because I was going to leave it, the link in the chat, but I couldn't find it. But I will subscribe, and everybody needs to subscribe. And we want to support what you got going there.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Have a great night.
Thanks, Will. Appreciate it. Have a good night. All right. The finale. Here we go. Voice of college football. Chris is on the line. Chris.
Hey, how are you?
I am doing just fine. How are you, sir?
Oh, good. You told me, and like I said, if you don't want to talk about it, it's your show. I don't want to dictate how you run your show and all that. But
as long as it's about college football, we'll discuss it.
Well, okay. One of your callers, was it Tide Guy, I guess? He talked a little bit about, I guess, that there's more, you would know all about it. So that's kind of why I'm asking you. With an expanded playoff that, according to what he said anyway, did he say there'd be like up to 3 times as much money, I guess, that could be, allocated out to the teams that are in is that one of the reasons? I guess what I'm asking you is, I wasn't under the impression that a playoff really gained a whole lot more money than just maybe even, because that was one of my arguments, I guess. Not that my argument really matters, but I didn't really know that there was more money that could be acquired through a playoff. Is that a fair statement?
Well, there's simply going to be more money made because there's going to be more high-profile games on TV, and advertisers are going to pay money.
Oh, okay. And, well, I guess the question I have on that, though, so that's one of the things I don't quite understand, and maybe it's because I'm an old school kind of a guy, I guess. I was raised, that's just the way it is. I was raised in a generation, I think, where for me, even though I never played in any sports really, I think for me, a good, a sufficient reward or whatever, for me probably would have been like just a bowl game, depending on how good I guess our team was, but I never played, though. It's the only thing. So I can't really speak for anybody other than myself, but I played one year in school, but I don't think we were good enough to even advance anyway. But I guess I'm a little confused because, like I tried to explain to you, and it's not that necessarily that I think my ideas are any better than anybody else's, but let's just pretend, okay, because that's kind of what it is a little bit. If we kind of knew in advance that, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily always the case, because you kind of indicated it probably wasn't, but let's just say that we did, though. Let's just say that we knew that in advance, without having an extended playoff or whatever, that the chances were pretty high. And I'm not saying necessarily that they are, but let's just say that they are. That it's going to be Alabama and Ohio State regardless. Mm-hmm. I guess I'm a little confused as to what the reason might be to include more teams just to fill a bracket, I guess, if we kind of know in advance. And I'm not saying that we do. I want to be careful about how I phrase it. But
yeah.
Well, I guess I don't really understand what the benefit would be if we kind of know in advance what the result might end up being anyway. Am I wrong to have that assumption? Or
all right. So there's 2 easy answers to that question. You already answered yourself. You already answered your question.
Okay.
We don't know.
No.
We think we know, and we have a good idea. So many of those times we're right. If we polled College Football Nation halfway through the season every year and said, who are the 2 best teams in the country? Who do you want to see in the national championship game? Who are the teams that are going to make it? Yeah, would we be right? Some years, yes. Some years we would get 1 out of 2. Some years we would get 0 out of 2. So we don't know. That's why we play sports on the field. The second answer would be money. The other reason why the playoff is being expanded even beyond the first answer is money.
Yeah. But I guess my question again, and again, it's maybe my ignorance and not really understanding all the things that go into I guess, I'm not sure, I guess, who's paying for it really, but we don't necessarily have to go into that. I just, my interest isn't really in an expanded playoff. So I'm speaking just solely for myself, but kind of like what I'm trying to explain to you again, if the odds are pretty good, I'm not necessarily saying that they are. I mean, we'll find out, over next 2 or 3 months or so, who actually is going to be in the championship. But, let's just say that it works out to where it's Alabama and Ohio State. I mean, I guess my point might be simply, if there's a way to kind of get down to brass tacks, without having to use a playoff, why not just go with that?
Because again, we don't know.
Okay. Well, but if the probability were to weigh in that towards that being the final result, though, that's kind of where I still don't. And I'm not necessarily trying to push anything on anybody, Mark, but I did. You can't say I didn't do my homework. I mean, I've kind of done my homework, and I guess
absolutely.
Let's just say it doesn't. Let's say it's LSU, and I don't know. Let's just say instead of instead of Ohio State and Alabama, it's LSU and Clemson. I mean, who knows? Then I guess I've been proven wrong, without even knowing. I mean, that would be one thing that would prove it wrong already. But so it's not really that I pretend to know what's going to happen. It's just that I just kind of wonder, for the good, maybe it's for the good of, maybe it's not even for the good of the sport, for the good of what I think is important, why we have to do something that might not necessarily fit every circumstance.
Okay. Let's say that you're correct, that the number 1 and 2 teams in the country for 10 straight years always won through the playoffs, won all their games, and played each other in the championship game.
Well, that's not what I'm saying, but go ahead.
Okay, what are you saying?
Well, I guess all I'm really saying is what I know, and I'm not even saying that I really do know, but I'm saying let's just pretend that I do. Because, I mean, this is like the first time I've ever tried to do this, to be honest with you. Try to predict the result. I don't know how to do that. You know how to do that. I don't. But this is actually the first.
I don't know how to do that any better than anybody else. I'm just making a projection.
Well, that's basically all I'm doing too. But I think I have an advantage because I'm using, like I told you, I tried to send you I don't know if you got a chance to look at it. What I'm using is kind of advanced, what do they call it? It's not really sabermetrics, but it's advanced, whatever they call it, computation or something, to where they kind of have a pretty good handle on who's better at this point in time. So unless things change, the chances aren't, it's like kind of like watching a race in kind of like as in a way. So right now it's like neck and neck between Ohio State and Alabama. Yeah, it could change. One of them could, something could happen. One could get tripped up. One could, but if it's really just about like watching kind of like a NASCAR race or something, you don't need a playoff for a NASCAR race. You just keep following the guy, and the guy that finishes the race first, that's who your champion is. That's kind of really all I'm really doing. I mean, people might not necessarily look at it like that, and I'll be the first to admit that it might not work in every season. But
this is why your analogy doesn't work, Christopher. And this is your better analogy. If you want to relate college football to NASCAR,
right,
then we would just run the time trials on Thursday.
Uh-huh.
And the two teams that run the 2 cars that won the time trials, they would be the 2 that we would know would be the best, and we don't need to run the race on Saturday.
Well, but that's not what Red NASCAR does, though.
Exactly. They actually race.
Okay.
Then that's what we want to do. We want the teams to play on the field.
Maybe the analogy that I'm using isn't the best one to try to explain it with, but in a way it kind of is, though, because I don't know why we're all so conditioned into a playoff being like the way I guess it's because of the NFL, maybe. I guess at the NFL, I guess it's kind of hard to say that the team that wins the Super Bowl isn't the best team, but I guess what I'm trying to tell you, and maybe it's not me, I think that, there's, what is it? We could look at it in a number of different ways, but at the end of the day, it's the team that finishes first, and no matter how you go about deciding who's the first place team is, that's all we really care about, though, right? So, I mean, if I have a way that seems to work pretty much every year, I don't understand why we should just say, well, that's not the right way to go if it actually does what it's supposed to do.
Why play any of the games? Why play any of the games for the entire season?
Well, no. I mean, that part maybe I'm just telling you, Mark, that I think I have a pretty good handle on this, and maybe it's up to you. You can make up your own mind whether you think I do or not. I mean, you threw into question whether you thought I had the right trick or whatever.
It's difficult for me to imagine that you are reasonably proposing that selecting 2 teams is better than playing on the field to determine the teams that earn the right to play in the championship game. And where that started, you know where that started? That started a lot of different places. That started in the Roman Colosseums. They didn't look at two guys and say, I guess he's better than him. He's got bigger muscles, or he growls louder or something, or his chariot looks tougher or stronger or sturdier. They went out there and they went at it. This is why we play sports, is to get the competitors in the arena to determine the best team or individual.
Well, I don't know that I'm necessarily saying that I don't want to see that happen. I guess then, are we going to stop at 12, or is it going to go to what? All right, we got 12. Then the first year that I guess the number 12 team doesn't, oh, well, we need another, I guess I'm not real happy with it, because I just kind of think it's, I'm not going to say it won't work. It probably will work, but
there is a difference, Chris, between this expansion and other expansions.
What is it?
This is the simple reason.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm going to answer it in two ways. The first one is going to be, what can a team do right now to guarantee that they will make the playoffs? Everybody else, play along with me on this one. Answer this question. Everybody in the chat, answer this question. What can a team do, a college football team, do in any given season under the current playoff format to guarantee that they will make the playoffs?
I don't know. I'm just being honest with you, Mark. I have no idea. What do they?
That's a good answer, actually.
Okay.
Pay the refs. I wish this could home field and buzz. So I'm not getting a good answer here, but so one more time, I'll give the chat another second or two here. What can a team do right now in college football to guarantee that they will make the college football playoff? What do they need to do?
Win every game, I guess.
The hat says go undefeated and win the conference. Tony Altimore, not even undefeated. So we got Tony. He's on to it. The answer is nothing. There is nothing that guarantees making the playoff.
Okay.
You can't even control your own destiny to the playoff.
You mean, are you talking about the 14 playoff? I'm not sure exactly which one you're referring.
I'm referring to the current playoff.
Oh, the 14.
That's what I stated. The current playoff. There is nothing you can do to guarantee that you're going to be in the playoff.
Well, I don't know.
If every conference champion goes undefeated, one of them is going to be left out. And they did everything conceivable to make the playoff. They won all their games. They won a conference championship. They got left out of the playoff. There's nothing you can do to guarantee a playoff spot. Is that what we want?
Well, can you give me an example of that? I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about.
Ohio State goes undefeated this year. Alabama goes undefeated this year. Clemson goes undefeated this year. Oklahoma State goes undefeated this year.
Okay.
And USC goes undefeated this year. Who's making the playoff?
Well, I don't know. That's not.
Well, I don't know who's going to make the playoff either, but I can guarantee you one thing. One of them is not going to make the playoff because there's only 4 spots.
Okay. Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
And there's probably actually to that to that line of thinking. I don't know I've never really investigated it, but it's probably not such an unlikely scenario that might actually happen.
Who cares how unlikely it is? It's idiotic to form a system in which a team doesn't even know what it needs to do to make the playoffs.
Okay.
At least in this expanded system, we know if you win your conference championship, you are making the playoffs. That is a good goal to have. Win your conference championship and you will make the playoff.
That's for a Power 5, though.
That is for a Power 5. They play a whole other level of football than the other 5 conferences.
Well, maybe.
No, not maybe. They do. Chris, we've discussed this way too many times, and even you have stated and had the percentages.
Oh, yeah.
What is the percentage?
Like 20%.
Versus losses.
That it's like
1 against the group of 5. It's like 88%. It's not debatable. The last comment you made is completely moronic to state that you don't know that there's a difference between the group of 5 and the Power 5. When the Power 5 wins like 88% of the games between the 2 levels.
Wow, yeah.
There's a distinct difference between the Power 5 and the group of 5.
Yeah, well, I agree. I'm not saying you're wrong. Well, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think you're right about that.
Okay.
Did it sound
All right.
like?
Let's not get sidetracked. I want you. This is your time. You control the conversation. What are you trying to achieve here?
Well,
you believe that your system can determine the two teams.
I think it does do
it. To play a playoff.
I think it actually does, but that's almost beside the point because.
Okay. So if we went back in time through every year, your system at the conclusion of the regular season, has always selected the two teams.
No.
Well, then we need to play a playoff.
Well, okay. I mean, you have a good point, Mark, and I'm not here to say you're wrong, or it's not really my place to do it anyway. But I guess the ones I already mentioned.
Really not a right or wrong. I prefer a playoff. Most people prefer a playoff because actually, at the very core of what we enjoy here is the entertainment.
Sure.
Of the games.
Sure.
And then also the factor that the competition should determine who has earned a championship, not some kind of system or rating ranking.
You said you're going to give me a couple minutes. I don't know. Do I have a minute left?
Sure.
Okay, good. Let me just try, in a way I hope people can maybe relate to. I can't put myself in somebody else's shoes. And I know you have your objections, and I'm not saying you don't have good objections. I think you do. I mean, you already kind of gave me one of them, that it doesn't necessarily guarantee the best two teams, which it doesn't. But what it does do, I think, I'm trying to defend myself without being a jerk. I think what it actually does do is guarantee that we get a legitimate title game. But, I'll just throw that out there for whatever it is. But actually what I do is I weigh each, because it's based, and I'm not, you say it's like biased, but really what I do is I've gone back and I know kind of where each conference is. And so I know how to evaluate each conference separately. And so assuming I know what I'm doing, which I know that's kind of a stretch maybe because I'm not sure you really think I do because I make so many mistakes. But I think I've kind of taken care of some of the things that maybe would make it maybe less reliable. And so I'm just asking you to trust me. And maybe you don't want to do it, and I don't blame you for not necessarily wanting to. But, I'm going to keep trying to put it out there just so people can take a look at it. And then if they don't like it, then it's like with anything else. If you don't like something, you just say, well, that's not what I want to do. But, I think it actually does, at the very least, I think it does a relatively good job as far as making a let's call it educated guess about who probably might win the championship. And I guess if it turns out not to be them, then I guess it'll just prove me wrong. But it's like, I'm not just like inventing something and like throwing it out there and it's willy-nilly and it doesn't really have any meat to it or whatever. I mean, it's my best work is what it is. And I guess if it's not doing what it's supposed to do, then you can just say it's not what you want. But like I say, right now it's Alabama and Ohio State. I mean, it's not because I want it to be, that's just how it is. And I guess we'll find out if that's a fair assessment or not, but that's how it is right now though. At the moment, if we had to stop the season right now, it'd be Alabama and Ohio State in the championship game.
So for the last two seasons, prior to the 2021 season, I picked Alabama and Georgia to play in the national championship game.
Right, and you were right.
And prior to 2020, I picked Ohio State and Alabama to play in the national championship game. So how many years do I need to be right in a row before we all just trust me and I just pick the national championship game before we start the season? And obviously I'm kidding.
Well, no, I don't know that you are kidding. I remember at the beginning of the year, the beginning of the year, you said you predicted it'd be Alabama and Georgia last season. That was before the season even started. I didn't do that. That was something you did. But whatever. I mean, I'm just saying. I'm not saying that you should like put your trust in me for no reason. I'm just saying if it turns out, and it might not even come close to it. Maybe at the end of the year, it's going to be like I said, Clemson, and I don't even know who it might else be. Clemson, and maybe who knows, but. But I'm saying if what I know is right, then it should be Alabama and Ohio State. How many times do I have to be right before maybe I have to have some, I'm not saying I am right, but how many times do I have to be right? Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's what I'm asking you.
Well, my answer would be infinity because I want the teams to have to play each other on the field to determine the championship.
Well, so do I.
But you just want them to play in the regular season against other teams that aren't connected to the actual teams.
Well, no. I just want to make sure that what we do to decide who wins the championship is the right thing. That's all. That we get the right result. That's all. That's all I want.
How can we not have the right result by actually having the teams play each other?
Well, I'm just saying, Mark, I don't know. I'm not sold on the idea of a playoff just because I don't know that it's anything other than just the fact I just don't know that it's the right thing. That's all. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that it doesn't work. Did I say it couldn't work? It works. But I just don't know why we need it. That's all. I don't know that it does any better than what I think I could do if you let me be, like you say, commissioner, which nobody's going to want me to do it. But, I just wonder if what I could do wouldn't necessarily be just as good as what the playoff could do. And, maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe I'd do a terrible job. I don't know. But that's what I would like to do. But, I know we're looking at the interest of a lot of people and, if they don't like what I do, then I guess that's reason enough not to use it. But I guess I'm just saying if it does work, I don't understand why it's such a huge deal not to use it. If it works.
All right, Chris.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
I appreciate you being here.
Have a good night. You too.
All right. I think with that, we have wrapped it up for the night. Nebraska and Rutgers. It's a monumental, huge game, enormous game. You probably don't know this right now, but these two teams are going to play in the Big Ten championship game. So it's a precursor to the Big Ten championship game. Tomorrow night, Friday night, Nebraska, Rutgers, and we're going to be here after the game to review the scintillating play of the Scarlet Knights of Rutgers and the mighty Huskers of Nebraska. And it looks like the real MVP is not going to let me get off here, but we're gonna close with the real MVP. What's going on, man?
There were some people that wanted me to call after Chris, so I thought I would oblige. And one of them was the great Tony Altimore. And whenever Tony Altimore asks you to call in, you have to call in, Mark. So,
well, I wouldn't know that because I never get asked by anyone to call in.
Oh, we always appreciate having you on and what you do for the community. And I really enjoyed you yesterday on the Pac-12 show with the bracket, which, by the way, doing the bracket is a great idea. And you arguing for Ole Miss over Utah was great. So
there is no comparison between Ole Miss's opponents and Utah's.
Exactly. That was the point I was making. I was very confused, but I wasn't a voter. I didn't have any say in this poll, so I cannot be blamed for it. But I think Wake Forest should have got some mention as well. I don't know where they finished up, but Wake Forest has had a heck of a team. They only lost to number 3 Clemson in their poll in double overtime by a touchdown, and they beat a really solid Florida State team.
Yep.
So they should at least be in the next team out, in my opinion, if not in the tournament. But I know Cincinnati has to be in there since they're a Group 5 school. But yes. Mark, there are some great games, and one of the great games this week has already been played. UCF dominated SMU 41-19. What's your reaction to that?
I would say that I'm a bit surprised by the distance between the two teams, but I did think UCF was going to win the game. I got to think that maybe some people at Auburn are having some regrets over a decision to let Gus Malzahn go. I don't know. Yeah, there's a pretty clear distinction of good teams in the American Conference, and SMU's been one of those teams the last few years, but I think they're suffering under losing Sonny Dykes with Rhett Lashley there. Not that Lashley will not be a good coach eventually, but they're down to 2-3 now. They did play Maryland tough down to a 4-quarter game, but UCF and Cincinnati getting together later. Hopefully they play in the same conference, but we know not everyone plays each other, but I'm going to hope that those two get together later because that could be the game of the year in the American Conference.
They do play on October 29th.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me that even though UCF is a great Group of 5 school, they did lose to a Louisville team. I think that shows the gap between the group of 5 and the power 5. So if I was the guy doing the playoffs, I wouldn't have the group of 5 at all. But I'm not the ones making that decision. So
it seems to me that I had a conversation and I was just explaining to somebody recently, it was about 3 minutes ago, that there was a difference between the power of 5 and the group of 5 when it was responded that I don't know that there's a difference.
Okay. Where do you think Louisville would rank in the power 5? Like, where do they rank? Bottom 10?
Louisville in the power 5. Yeah. This season. Yeah. Syracuse kicked them around and they lost to Florida State, but that was a pretty close game. Although Florida State was playing with a backup quarterback and they got kicked around they lost by, BC has been looking really bad. They lost to BC. And Louisville only won that game because UCF threw a pick in the end zone with about 2 minutes left. They were in position to win the game. Yeah. Louisville, not good.
The context of you have a great group of 5 school playing a very bad, I would say, power 5 school, and it being close. So I'm looking at the 12-5 playoff game, which was Georgia versus Cincinnati. And I think that the 5 seed is basically going to get a bye. Like, they've got to prepare. They obviously have to practice and do some game planning, but like, it's 45-7 territory we're talking about, especially if there's 2 SEC teams in there. And Georgia's probably the second or third best team in the country, but because of the playoff structure, they would have to be bumped down to 5. That could get ugly. Like, that would be ugly quickly.
We saw Alabama play a game against Cincinnati last year where Cincinnati didn't get embarrassed on the scoreboard, but Alabama played a very strange kind of game where it was pretty obvious from early in the game that, like, let's take the air out of the ball, make this the shortest game possible, get out of Dodge, don't get hurt because they can't score. So we don't need to score 50. And there you got a 27-6 game. They just ran.
Worried about the most in the future playoff games is you're going to have teams that are just so clearly matched up against other teams that it's just going to be like that Alabama-Cincinnati game where it's kind of close, but not really.
Yeah.
And then the next biggest concern I have is players sitting out.
Yes.
If you have players sitting out, like Bryce Young is a perfect example of this. Bryce Young is going to probably be a first-round top 10 pick for sure. Top 10 pick. And what does he get for playing in the playoffs?
No, it's a great point. And it's one thing when he's looking at, okay, I'm going to play a semifinal game and a championship game. But when you start talking about, okay, I may have to play 4 games, this could be a problem.
And that was one of the major things I wish college football would have solved before expanding the playoffs. Because if you've already basically ruined the bowl structure permanently because people were already sitting out. But if you've got the 12 teams, it's just going to get worse. And now if people sit out of playoff games, it kind of ruins the prestige of the playoffs. Because what if you have Bryce Young sit out for the playoffs? And then Alabama fans will be like, we did lose in the semifinal game against Georgia, but we didn't have our starting quarterback. We didn't have Will Anderson playing in that game. So does it really count? That's what I'm afraid is going to happen for the sport. I don't want it to see go down that way, but that is a very real concern. And the only thing I think we can do is have the bowls or maybe the conferences or the TV streaming services compensate the players for playing in these big time games.
So, yeah, I'm kind of losing a handle on some of the conversations we had, in the off season about this, but this is starting to bring back some memories of at least some ideas that other people had and that I had. But at some point we were talking about this and I thought, well, there's your answer right there. Compensation for these players. If we have a bowl sponsor that's paying X number of dollars, $5 million, and is being divided X, Y, and Z, well, we can get these players to keep from opting out if we pay them money to play in not just the playoff games, but the bowl games.
Right. Something I would do to encourage winning instead of doing a Kyle Trask, which is showing up in the first quarter and then sitting out the rest of the game, is have it unevenly distributed between the winning team and the losing team. So the winning team gets 2.5%, the losing team gets 2% of the revenue.
Okay. If you worked out the formula, even for us, 2.5 versus 2%. Okay. Yeah, like an NFL playoff numbers. This has happened with the NFL. This happens with Major League Baseball. Yes, there's a difference between the compensation of the winning team and the losing team. Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know if those are the actual numbers they use, but the best case and easiest case scenario that I see is the NBA All-Star Game, where the winning team gets paid money per quarter if they win it, and then they get a total for winning the actual game. So that's probably the obvious scenario. I think it's $100,000 if you win a quarter, and then like $250,000 if you win the game. So they could do something like that as well to really spice it up. But there is actually games this week, Mark, believe it or not.
Yep.
And there's a lot of good games. And I'm going to kind of go over some of the under the radar games. There's obviously a big noon kickoff for some reason deciding Michigan, Indiana. So
yeah, that's awful.
I'm not going to talk about that game, or TCU, Kansas. But I want to talk about Arkansas, Mississippi State.
Okay.
Arkansas is 3-2. If they lose this game, they're 3-3. Is that kind of disappointing for where Arkansas's been over the last few years?
Yes.
No, I don't think Sam Pittman would be on the hot seat or anything close to that.
No.
But do you think Arkansas has kind of reached their ceiling of what they can be in the future as an 8 or 9 win team?
No. They can do better.
What's their ceiling?
What's that?
What is their ceiling?
You are muffled beyond belief now.
Let me try.
We'll give this a second or two.
Okay, so can you hear me better?
Yes, we got you now. For some reason, every response that you've given for the entire phone call, like somebody put it in the chat, it sounds like for the first few seconds that you're talking, like you're underwater, and then we can hear the rest of it for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know why that is, to be honest with you. I've been using the same device every single time, but maybe I just need a new device.
Until the last couple times you've called.
Yeah, anyway. It's strange. But if what is Arkansas' ceiling?
What's their ceiling? Well,
yeah,
they can be a top 10 team in the country. Maybe not year in and year out, but they can put together a top 10 team.
Okay. And the next game I want to talk about is Purdue, Maryland.
Yeah.
Purdue, this is a very interesting game and a very critical game that I think at the end of the season, if Purdue wins this game, we can look back and say this is the reason they won the West. Do you agree with that analysis?
Well, I think it's an important game. Every game in conference is important if your goal is to win the conference. Teams aren't winning conference championships with more than 2 losses, so you can't lose games and win conference championships. So of course they're important to win, but that's not one of Purdue's more critical games. So it's important that they win because they've already lost a conference game. So more than likely, if they lose this game, then they've got to be perfect the rest of the year and maybe do a little praying and hoping and wishing. But their more important games are against the likes of the one that they won last week, Minnesota. Like if you looked at Purdue's schedule and said they're going to go 1-1 against Minnesota and Maryland, well, you would want them, if you're a Purdue fan, to win the Minnesota game and lose the Maryland game because it's in division it helps their division record. It hangs a loss on Minnesota. And if there's a tiebreaker, they've got it over Minnesota. So it's an important game, but it's a conference game. Of course it is.
Yeah, but I just meant in terms of the quality of teams Purdue is going to play, Maryland is probably close, if not at the top of the list for what's remaining for them. So if they beat Purdue and you just kind of look ahead at the rest of their schedule and think, okay, they can win this game and then this game, Maryland, it could be an 8 or 9 win team this year.
Yeah, I get your point. I don't necessarily look at it like that. Like I think Maryland's in that mix with most of the Big Ten Western Division. They're no better than anybody else, and nobody's better than them. They're all roughly the same.
Okay, and then a very important conference game that I can't believe I'm talking about, but has to be talked about, is Duke Georgia Tech. Mark,
Nice.
Duke Georgia Tech. If Georgia Tech wins this game, does that say how much does that say about Jeff Collins?
There it is. ESP. The game's not even watchable. It's on ESPN3. So we can't even, I don't even know how to get ESPN3. I guess I can probably look it up, but I will not be doing that. So there must be 17 or 18 games every week on network television. When I say network, I mean just, yeah, a network. And that doesn't even make the list. So yeah, Georgia Tech, they beat Pitt and they lost to I guess they're 1-1 in the conference, and Duke must be 2-0, 1-0, 2-0.
Let me pull up their schedule real quick for you, but just talk about, like, everybody was expecting Georgia Tech to be horrible and awful, and if they beat,
And they are.
well,
They
yeah, but they beat Pittsburgh, which is good for them type thing.
Well,
like, they
it
beat
is good for
Pittsburgh
them.
on the road.
They all still suck. they just, again, let's see Auburn play in that division. I'd be curious.
It looks like Duke is 1-0. Their only conference win is Virginia.
Yes, Virginia. They beat them pretty bad. What, 38-17, if I remember correctly?
That is correct.
And yeah, Georgia Tech lost to Clemson. This is where the scheduling really factors in. Poor Georgia Tech has to play Clemson every year. And so there's only one other team in the division that has to play Clemson. And as we know, that's basically an automatic loss. And I think that's Miami. Miami plays. So nobody else plays Clemson. Those two have to play Clemson, and they're both losers. And don't get me started on Miami. But yeah, Georgia Tech, of course, had the big win against Pitt. So they have now, they've marked off one major obstacle toward pulling off a miracle. Sure.
Yeah, and with the way the ACC Coastal is, if they win this game, they've got as good a shot as anybody else. Duke, I mean, that's crazy. It is. If they beat Duke, you can make a good argument Georgia Tech as being the two toughest teams in that Coastal. So,
well, the North Carolina Miami game is pretty important.
I understand that, but Miami, I just have no faith in them after losing to Middle Tennessee.
Yeah, I understand that, but North Carolina,
it's not.
North Carolina's, they're 1-0 in the ACC.
Right. And it wasn't just that Miami lost to Middle Tennessee, like they had 8 turnovers, trick plays. They just got beaten on the lines of scrimmage, out-athleted, and it's like,
I know. I don't know what goes on with that program. It's crazy.
Yeah, if you're going to get out-athleted by Middle Tennessee, I can't take you seriously for the rest of the year. That's just the way it's got to be. And that was embarrassing to watch. It was funny and embarrassing to watch.
Yes, they are just the paper champion of all paper champions.
And the final game I'll talk about that nobody else will probably talk about, Mark, is Army versus Wake Forest.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you remembered last year, but
I do.
Defense Tennessee, if you're a fan of either of those games,
yeah,
you would have hated this game. It was like 70-56 or something like that.
Yep, I believe that was the score.
Do you think we're going to see as high scoring affair as this time as it was last year?
No. Let's take the under on that.
Okay, you got any breakdown or favorite in this game or anything like that?
Well, Wake's going to win this game. Where are they playing? They're playing at Army, aren't they?
No, it's at Wake.
Oh, so they played at Army last year. DeAndre, sorry, we're done for the night. I'm way over here. But appreciate you being here, man. Yeah, I got nothing to tell you on, I know Wake. I've watched them play a couple times. I saw the Florida State game. I saw the Clemson game. I was impressed by both. They really took it to Florida State. And that wasn't just Sam Hartman lighting up Florida State. That was Justice Ellison, their top running back, with 114 yards in that game. And also, they easily could have beaten Clemson. That game could have went the other way.
Oh, yeah. And Army is 1-3 this year. They've lost at Coastal Carolina, overtime against Texas, San Antonio, and lost to Georgia State. Their only win is against Villanova.
Yeah, this game's going to be like, how about 45-20?
Yeah, I'm rooting for Army. I hope they make a bowl game. I know they're very proud of that type of thing. And, they don't have any of their players sit out there in their bowl game. So that makes them more watchable than most teams nowadays. So,
yeah, maybe they'll beat Missouri again.
Oh, that would be funny. That was funny last year. And I'm gonna call it. Vanderbilt is gonna beat Missouri this year in the SEC.
All right. But by the transitive property, are they then going to beat Georgia?
No.
Okay. All right.
No. Georgia. It's very interesting for them this week. They play Auburn. They should dominate, but if they struggle on the struggle bus this year, I don't think they'll be favored in the SEC East. I'm gonna favor Tennessee.
Okay. I kind of like Tennessee to make some noise as well.
Yeah. I love my Kentucky Wildcats, but we just don't have the horses to keep up with Tennessee and Georgia, so it's unfortunate, but you need an offensive line to beat a team like Georgia, and we're missing that. I know you're tired,
man.
Mark. So
Well,
hit the like and subscribe button.
Thanks, man. Have a good night.
Yeah, no problem.
We'll be back after Nebraska Rutgers, and a lot of great content coming your way on Friday. Here at the Voice of College Football. Yes, way too many records, way too many live streams for one day. So, yeah, at the 2:37 mark, we are shutting it down. Appreciate everybody being here. We will see you on Friday night. Actually, come to think of it, we do have a live stream coming up at 10 a.m. with Pat Murphy from Bucknuts. So that's going to be on the Ohio State channel at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. See you then.